A scandal of the century, Decarno, the young patriarch of the empire's largest family, the Tiz family, is rumored to be marrying Evangeline, the only daughter of the wealthy Count O'Hara. This caused a sensation among the subjects of the empire. People discussed the news they saw. Oh my goodness, this is truly wonderful news. A noble marriage to consolidate status. It's finally the turn of these two families. This is the most perfect marriage in the world. But in reality, Eva said with a sad expression, "Let's break off the engagement." She said this directly to Decarno Van Tiz, leaving him dumbfounded. What? Because Evangeline canceled the engagement before the wedding. Rewind to a few months earlier at the Tiz Duchy. Eva gently lifted her skirt, pondering. Decarno Van Tiz asked her coldly, "What is today's schedule?" Eva immediately replied to him, "During the day, I will review the remaining documents, and in the afternoon there is a banquet, so I must go and receive everyone." He immediately turned around and said to Eva without emotion, "Another banquet, troublesome. From now on, attend the banquets yourself. You don't need me to accompany you." The patriarch of the Tiz ducal family, Decarno Van Tiz. Hearing him say this, a sad expression flashed across her face, but she immediately forced a smile and said gently, "Yes, Your Grace, please attend to your own affairs." Eva thought sadly, today's banquet is to celebrate my birthday. I wish he could attend. But she didn't say it out loud, only asking him gently, "Do you need me to tie your necktie for you?" Decarno Van Tiz coldly refused. "No, I'll do it myself." Eva continued to think sadly. Just because of my birthday, I've wasted the time of the busiest Duke Tiz in the empire. Decarno's icy gaze forced her to bury her thoughts deep inside. This won't do, will it? She sat quietly, watching him leave. In the end, we are just a political marriage. There is no love to speak of at this moment. Eva was alone in the room. She wanted to say out loud, "Please come back after you leave." But she received no response. As she gently rang a small bell, she mused, "It's too bad, but don't be sad. If I am the Duchess of the Tiz family, I naturally have to be patient." The servant immediately entered, bowing respectfully. "Did you call for me?" Eva said, "Bring me some food and tea, and birth control pills." A grand party was held tonight. Everything in the room was luxurious and magnificent, and the nobles were all dressed in solemn and beautiful attire. Everyone kept saying, "Oh my goodness, happy birthday, Miss O'Hara." Eva lowered her head slightly and replied politely, "Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come, Countess." She also bowed happily and said, "What are you saying, miss? With our relationship, of course I had to come." But then, the Countess immediately approached, grasped Eva's hand tightly, and exclaimed excitedly, "And the banquet venue is so beautiful, truly worthy of being your birthday banquet, miss." Eva smiled gently and pleasantly, replying to her, "It will soon be the death anniversary of the Duchess Tiz, so I only held a simple party. Thank you for your concern." The only daughter of Count O'Hara's family, Evangeline O'Hara. "I haven't prepared much, but please enjoy the banquet, madam." Unexpectedly, there were also people who came not to congratulate, but to mock and cause trouble. Those girls kept laughing at Eva. Everyone said, "Someone who is about to marry into the Tiz family is different, but I didn't see Duke Tiz today. He didn't attend either. It must be because he's too busy." One of them, holding a wine glass, said without reservation, "Even so, this is his fiancée's birthday banquet. Shouldn't he attend on such a day? It really is a marriage for money, right?" She still didn't stop, but became even more enthusiastic. "Now, I have to say, if Count O'Hara hadn't discovered the mine, it would have been easy to try and arrange this marriage." Someone immediately stopped her. "Miss, you've had too much to drink." She still didn't stop. "Did I say anything wrong?" But unexpectedly, a voice sounded, "No, you're quite right." The girl who had just been speaking without restraint immediately fell silent in fright. Eva was standing right next to them. That girl recoiled a little and shouted loudly, "Miss Evangeline." The others also broke out in a cold sweat, not daring to say anything more. But Eva didn't hold it against them for speaking ill, only thanking them for attending the party. She smiled gently and kindly, advising them to be quiet. Although the words seemed simple, they made the group of young ladies turn pale with fright, not daring to say another word. They no longer had that smug look, becoming more shy and humble in front of Eva. Just then, it seemed someone was looking for her, and Eva quickly turned to look. The servant brought Eva a letter. It seemed to be a letter from the Count, which also brought her some comfort on her birthday. Eva opened the letter, anticipating its contents. What will it be this time? The world's most precious Arabelle diamond. Perhaps. perhaps a certificate of ownership for an island or the deed to a resort villa. But holding the letter in her hand, Eva froze. She seemed extremely shocked, standing stunned for a long time. Eva read the letter, dumbfounded. What does this mean? Father is missing. She trembled, remembering the image of her father, his loving words. Her father had once said to his lovely princess, I will give you everything in the world and make you the freest soul in the Belayish Empire. Count O'Hara, my father, the leader of the largest O'Hara merchant guild in the empire. Eva's father had never hesitated to travel far across the seas, personally journeying throughout the country for exchanges. This time, too, her father had traveled far to exploit a newly discovered mine. However, the merchant ship returning here had sunk without a trace, and even my father's fate was unknown. Eva clutched the letter in her hand tightly. She tried hard not to show any emotion. She had to find a way quickly. She thought to herself and consoled herself. Calm down. Confirm the truth first. Then she immediately instructed a servant. Can you call Philip from the O'Hara Merchant Guild to help me? She still wore a radiant and gentle smile, as if nothing had happened. Just then, the man put down his quill pen and said, We'll continue later. It was Decarno discussing work. The servant standing beside him asked, Do you need more tea? But he just shook his head. No need. Unexpectedly, fell, and Sir Melton immediately said sarcastically to Decarno, What time is it now? Isn't he going too far? Both the servant and Decarno were startled and turned to look at him. Naval Commander Phelan, the eldest son of Count Hill Melton's family, Phelan Hill Melton. He continued, You missed the birthday banquet of the person who will be your wife, just focusing on work. Are you too fond of work? Hearing this, Decarno was somewhat surprised. What? Seeing Tiz's reaction, Phelan deliberately moved closer and joked, What kind of reaction is that? Didn't you know? Decarno frowned, somewhat displeased, and could only say, Be quiet. I have a headache. Fell and Cyril Melton continued to deliberately mock Decarno. He repeated the circulating rumors. People say you're so captivated by Miss O'Hara that you can't leave, but those are all lies, right? At this point, Decarno began to feel uncomfortable and glanced at Fell and Cyril Melton. I told you to be quiet. Unexpectedly, just then, someone interrupted their conversation, shouting loudly, Duke Both turned their heads to look. It was Eva, who had come looking for him in a hurry. Decarno was very surprised. Evangeline. Eva said urgently, Can we talk for a moment? Decarno immediately pushed the other two out, though they were somewhat reluctant. Everyone out, wait a moment. He approached her and asked, What's wrong? You came all the way here. Isn't the birthday banquet busy? But Eva had no mind for the banquet anymore. That's not important right now. I have something to say. But Decarno coldly refused her. I'm a bit busy now. Come back after the meeting is over. Hearing this, her expression turned sad. I don't know when I'll be able to return. Eva still tried to say to him, I know you can't go home for a few days because of the budget meeting at the beginning of the month, so just talk to me for a little while. Decarno still hadn't understood the seriousness of the problem and continued to urge Eva, We'll talk after the meeting. You go to the next room with Michael for a while. I can't stand it anymore. Eva had to say it outright. The O'Hara family is bankrupt. Decarno was stunned upon hearing this. What? Eva then recounted the situation to Decarno. All the merchant ships have sunk, and father is also missing. She pleaded, Are you willing to listen to me now? Unexpectedly, a family that was once renowned, wealthy, and admired by thousands had collapsed overnight. The O'Hara family was bankrupt. Decarno had also not anticipated this. Eva tried hard to suppress her inner pain in order to find a way to salvage the situation. She wanted to see Decarno and talk to him. All the merchant ships have sunk, and father is also missing. After listening to Eva's brief account of the situation, Decarno fell silent. Are you willing to listen to me now? After listening to Eva recount the entire event from the letter, unexpectedly, Decarno attitude showed no sign of wavering or concern. He simply asked again, The O'Hara Merchant Guild ship sank in the Romagna Sea. Eva seemed about to collapse, feeling disappointed. Even if this was just a political marriage, his gaze was colder than a stranger's. However, if I want to find and take care of father, now is not the time for me to cling to my pride. But she still tried, yes. At this moment, Eva earnestly begged him, I need your help. She hoped her fiancé would help her at this time, as he was the only person she could turn to. Can you immediately gather soldiers to search the area? Decarno remained silent. Unexpectedly, Decarno only said one thing to her. go home. It left her stunned, unable to believe what she had just heard. Eva hesitated. What? Duke Decarno still spoke to her coldly. Your sudden arrival at the palace at this time will surely cause gossip. If things become complicated, it won't be easy for me to arrange things either. Eva was distraught. I'm telling you, my father is still missing. The situation is very urgent. Decarno frowned coldly and said to Eva, I told you to go home. Evangeline was extremely bewildered. She couldn't believe Decarno would treat her this way, knowing the situation. She felt disappointed, thinking, Father is in grave danger, yet I must stay home because of what others might think. Evangeline immediately took a step back, having made up her mind. If you won't help, I'll do it myself. Decarno reached out and grabbed Evangeline. He still just instructed coldly, don't waver, wait quietly. He grabbed her sleeve, bowed slightly, and said in a low voice, this is what you, the one who will become the next Duchess, should do. Hearing him say coldly, I will inform you as soon as there is any news, she then left. Evangeline couldn't remain silent at this point, extremely confused inwardly. Father, is the only thing I can do really just to go back and stay put? She walked sadly to the garden, hoping to calm herself a bit, but those thoughts still clung to her like a shadow, impossible to shake off. I've been at home waiting for Decarno for a day now. When will I get news of Father? Evangeline started to feel scared, thinking of the worst that could happen. If something happened to Father, what would I do? She gently held a blue rose and immediately recalled a gentle voice saying, Evangeline, it's beautiful, isn't it? That was when she and her mother were admiring flowers in this garden. Her mother said, this blue rose comes from a continent across the sea. I particularly like this flower. It reminds me of the times I traveled with your father. She looked lovingly at Evangeline and asked, do you like it? Evangeline's mother told her, this garden will soon be yours. She couldn't forget that happy day. She was sure that in this ducal mansion, the only person who had loved her was the late Duchess. Evangeline thought sadly, if she were still alive, could she persuade the Duke? Suddenly, a white dog rushed towards her, barking loudly. Woof, woof, woof. It was Evangeline's little companion, the Duke's poodle, Rex. It wagged its tail, looking at her happily. Seeing Rex, Evangeline's mood improved a little. She smiled and petted Rex. Did you come to comfort me? Thank you. I'll pull myself together. Just then, someone suddenly approached. Evangeline turned her head to look. A man's footsteps grew closer. It was Decarno Van Tiz. He had also appeared at this moment to see her. You're here, Evangeline. Evangeline greeted him softly. You're back. She immediately asked him, is there any news of Father? Decarno Van Tiz lowered his head and hesitated for a moment. There's no definite news yet. Evangeline was extremely disappointed and dejected. Is that so? She pressed her lips together, trying to console herself. Since the news just arrived, it's normal not to have any information yet. But Evangeline couldn't help but say to Decarno Van Tiz, I feel uneasy. I can't stand it anymore. I want to go near the accident site to see. Maybe I can find some traces, maybe find traces of drifting objects. But before she could finish speaking, Decarno Van Tiz hastily and firmly refused. Don't do anything foolish. Evangeline's gaze froze. Decarno Van Tiz coldly forbade Evangeline from acting on her emotions. He said bluntly, you won't be able to do anything if you go. You'll only cause trouble. Evangeline couldn't bear it and felt frustrated. So you want me to just stand by and do nothing? All the ships have sunk. Not only as a daughter, but also as an heiress. I must understand the situation. She couldn't help but worry about her father. Images of being by her father's side during her childhood were still vivid in her mind, and now she didn't even know if her father was alive or dead. Father is my family, my only remaining relative. But after hearing her words, Decarno Van Tiz still calmly said to her, his death hasn't been confirmed yet, but assuming he is dead, you must consider more important matters. He explained everything to Evangeline. In a dire situation concerning the head of the O'Hara Company or its assets, if either falters, you will lose everything. If you become the subject of gossip, not only the Count, but the O'Hara Company will also come to an end. Even if the Count were alive, everything would collapse and be utterly lost. Evangeline slumped down, dejected. Was there nothing she could do to save the situation? Decarno Van Tiz merely placated her. So, stay put and wait for news. How did it come to this? She couldn't help but think. Even if it was just a relationship of convenience from the start, yet the father of the woman who is about to become his wife is missing. Evangeline said to him, unwilling to accept it, are you really not moved at all? She tried her best to express all her emotions, saying to Decarno Van Tiz, "You are a terrible person." Decarno Van Tiz frowned in confusion, staring at her, then left her there and turned to leave, only saying coldly, "Now that you know, do as I say." Evangeline clenched her fists, unable to bear it any longer, repeating the word wait while doing nothing. At this moment, she was no longer submissive, no longer trying to endure. Evangeline changed instantly. "You want me to just obey meekly?" Evangeline decided to act alone. "That's right, I'll sneak out to find out what's going on." But there was a truth Evangeline didn't know. Half a day ago, late at night, the bells had been ringing incessantly. Decarno Van Tiz slammed his quill pen on the table. Decarno Van Tiz exuded a murderous aura, his voice icy. "The final documents will be delivered within 2 days." The people sitting around turned pale with fright, trembling as they replied, "Yes, Your Grace." Meeting adjourned. Philin Hill Melton, drenched in sweat, hesitantly approached him with a document, thinking, after meeting Miss O'Hara, his mood has steadily darkened. "I still need to get the budget for the military district, but I can't bring myself to say it." Decarno Van Tiz's face was grim, his brow furrowed, as he sat there with a terrifying gaze. Philin Hill Melton mustered his courage and stammered, "Your Grace." My wording was extremely careful. He didn't let Philin Hill Melton finish, interrupting coldly, "Say no more." But he suddenly changed the subject, saying, "By the way, Philin." Philin Hill Melton was startled. Decarno Van Tiz immediately requested help. "Please send soldiers to Lehman to investigate." Hearing this, Philin Hill Melton was both surprised and flustered. "WH, what did you say?" Lehman is Gaul's territory. He didn't understand why Decarno Van Tiz would make such a risky decision. "You want me to send troops to a country we've been at war with?" Philin Hill Melton was extremely skeptical. "The two countries are in a ceasefire. What's the problem with that?" "What?" But Decarno Van Tiz immediately picked up his pen and signed the document for him. Then Decarno Van Tiz handed it to Philin Hill Melton, casually saying, "Here, is this enough for travel expenses?" A few days later, at the O'Hara Merchant Guild, Evangeline stood there, watching everyone rushing around in an unusual hurry, and she thought in confusion, "I rushed here first, but what's going on?" She was shocked, not understanding what was happening. The Merchant Guild is still intact. Last time Philip said all the assets were flooded and nothing was left. She was somewhat surprised and worried. Why is the Merchant Guild still unharmed? Suddenly someone called her young mistress. She recognized the person and immediately called out, "Philip, the manager of the O'Hara Merchant Guild." He looked at her with sad eyes. He approached, gently asking her what's wrong. "You come here." Evangeline tried to remain calm and said, "What else could it be? My father isn't here. Of course I have to come." I understand the young mistress's feelings, but his expression remained anxious and uneasy, and he hesitantly said to her, "Even so, you can't come here." The more he acted like this, the more suspicious Evangeline became, and she couldn't help but press him urgently. "Why? Why can't I come, Philip?" He was distracted and dared not speak. Evangeline became more distressed and worried. Why isn't he answering? It's like he's hiding some secret. At this moment, she seemed to have a realization, thinking, the rumors about father's accident haven't spread yet. Could it be that Decarno Van Tiz did something? Decarno Van Tiz's influence has already permeated the Merchant Guild. That man? Why is he doing this to me? Because even I, this perfect imposter who has lost the title of great benefactor, am still useful to him. But Evangeline's eyes were firm as she said to Philip, "I can't let him do whatever he wants. Philip, my father's life is hanging in the balance right now." She said resolutely, "If the O'Hara Merchant Guild's current master is me, then tell me the truth." Philip was startled and stammered, "Teach that." Suddenly, a voice came from behind, calling, "Evangeline, Duchess." She turned her head to look. It was a woman dressed extremely formally, holding a fan to cover her mouth, Baroness Leon. She stepped forward and warmly shook Evangeline's hand. A distant relative of the Duke Tiz family, Linda LeBlanc. She asked with concern, "I was very worried because you didn't look well last time I saw you. But seeing you out and about like this, safe and sound, it's such a relief." Evangeline looked at her very suspiciously. What is this woman doing at the Merchant Guild? Is she here to pick up jewels today? She remembered 2 years ago, ever since Decarno and I got engaged, father started giving things from the Merchant Guild for free to everyone related to the ducal family. Those who had received items once would often come to the Merchant Guild to collect things afterwards, and this woman was one of them. I was very dissatisfied with their shamelessness. In those days, father always gently coaxed me. He always stroked my head and coaxed me. Whenever something happened that made Evangeline sad, father would take meticulous care of her, making it impossible for her to stop thinking about him. For my princess, father regrets nothing. As long as my daughter lives comfortably, this little bit of money is nothing. She lowered her head sadly. At that time, I felt like a fool, but now I understand that father loved me so much that he gave his all. Seeing her like that, the woman couldn't help but ask, "Duchess, you look very pale today too. I'm really worried about you. Would you like to join us for a cup of hot tea? What do you think?" She said to Evangeline gently and kindly, "We are family too." She smiled and wanted to invite Evangeline for tea, but Evangeline remained wary and suspicious of her intentions. Perhaps spending a little time together wouldn't hurt. What was there to worry about? She was planning to use my weakness to gain something. Evangeline looked at her affectionate words and actions and couldn't help but feel suspicious. Although a relative, in terms of blood ties, she was no different from a stranger. She didn't hesitate to get close just to get valuable items. Evangeline didn't hesitate to raise her hand and gently push her hand away. From the beginning, to save face for her father and Duke Decarno Van Tiz, I had tried to endure. But this moment, Evangeline didn't want to be weak, nor did she want to be overly cautious anymore. She had bluntly refused her before, but now, I didn't need to do that anymore. "Sorry, Baroness, I have urgent business today. Excuse me." She simply said, "Please feel free to look around." She didn't expect to be rejected and cried out with a displeased expression, "But, Duchess." The people around who saw this couldn't help but whisper and laugh at her. "Oh my, I heard that Baroness Leon and Miss O'Hara are very close." She heard those words, was extremely embarrassed, and didn't dare to look up. It seemed the Baroness had misunderstood. "Because I heard you were going to take everyone to see high-end jewelry. That's why I came along." But she still didn't give up, trying to call Evangeline back, saying, "And Miss O'Hara, actually I have something I want to tell you in private." Evangeline paid no attention and coldly refused. "Sorry, madam. Let's talk later." She no longer had any mood to deal with other things. She was tired enough. "I don't want to suffer anymore because of the people of this family." She struggled to explain, "I'll be right back after getting some fresh air." She didn't give up at all, quickly grabbing Evangeline's shoulder and holding her back. "Miss O'Hara." She stubbornly kept calling, "Miss, I'm calling you." Evangeline couldn't bear it anymore, immediately turned around and shouted angrily, "Baroness, please." Her expression was extremely astonished. She shouted loudly, startling and frightening everyone present. "Please stop. Leave me alone." Philip also couldn't believe it, but perhaps he understood her feelings at that moment, a look of extreme sadness appearing on his face. "Young master." But then his gaze froze. "Young master." Unexpectedly, a burly woman rushed out, constantly cursing and beating her. "You bitch." The woman cried and cursed. "Devil. If anyone should die, it should be your father alone." But she said nothing, just looked at her, without anger or resistance. My son, save my son, save my son." At that moment, the guards ran to her side, shouting loudly, "Quick, protect Miss O'Hara." The woman who was tightly held was still struggling. Philip hurriedly ran to Evangeline, who was still crouching on the ground. "What's wrong, young master? Are you all right?" The woman was frantically unable to remain calm, shouting, "While you live happily, my son became fish food." Philip carefully checked Evangeline's condition, extremely worried. "The wound on your face." Evangeline looked up, her eyes sad, confused, and frightened as she looked at the woman. "Catch her! Quick, stop her!" Was that woman a relative of a sailor on the ship? As soon as I was attacked, the Tiz family knights jumped out as if they had been waiting from the beginning. They had been following me, waiting. Evangeline's eyes were filled with confusion about this sudden turn of events. I snuck out to go to the merchant guild, and this man had already anticipated it. My guess was finally right. Evangeline curled up in her chair, her eyes filled with sadness. She sat quietly, listening to Decarno say, "I told you to stay in the mansion and wait." He wasn't angry or complaining at all, still with that serious expression. He turned and asked her, "So, after running out to confirm, are you at ease?" Evangeline still kept her head down and answered softly, "As the young master, I was just confirming what I should know. I can't be imprisoned here indefinitely without a clear term." Decarno Van Tiz then said to her, "Live quietly until our wedding day." Wedding. Hearing this, Evangeline's eyes froze. In this situation, she clenched her hands, determined to speak out. Evangeline looked directly at him and said, "The O'Hara family has collapsed, and my father is dead. I've lost my only relative, and you're telling me to get married." She could no longer pretend to put everything behind her. Decarno looked at her and asked only. When Evangeline said those words, her eyes were filled with pain and despair. Who else is there? I don't even remember the face of my mother who divorced my father, and I don't have any siblings. And in this ducal mansion, the late countess who once showed me kindness is no longer here. Decarno suddenly fell silent, unable to say anything more, just gazing at her. Seeing this, Evangeline was extremely worried. She frowned, thinking, what's wrong? Why this sudden silence? Decarno reached out his hand directly towards her. He immediately pressed her down onto the chair. Evangeline was flustered. Duke. She looked at his always cold face with utter fear. What's wrong all of a sudden? But Decarno just looked at her silently. At this moment, Duke Decarno gently asked her, how did your face get like this? She avoided his gaze and simply said, it's just a slight scratch. Decarno was puzzled and asked her, why didn't you say you were hurt? She didn't answer, just stared at him. Decarno felt that Evangeline O'Hara might want to calm down, so he released her hand and immediately called for his servant, Michael. He came forward at once. Yes, your grace. Decarno commanded, from now on, restrict access to the West Wing. Evangeline O'Hara was stunned by these words, and the servant was also surprised, stammering, but according to tradition, that is the Duchess's property. Decarno remained firm. Without my permission, he said coldly, no one is to enter or leave. Evangeline O'Hara was distraught, her heart filled with extreme sadness. Indeed, he wants to control me again. Does this man only see me as an object? The two looked at each other, but each had their own thoughts. He then asked her, do you have anything else to say now? She replied coldly, no. Decarno also felt somewhat awkward, looking at her. Evangeline O'Hara turned away in frustration. I'll be leaving first. She ignored him and quickly left. The servant immediately bowed his head. My deepest apologies, Your Grace. Today's events were unexpected. Decarno questioned angrily, who? His face was extremely furious as he said coldly, who injured my woman's face? My woman, the Duchess. The servant stammered in fear. I heard it was a relative of a sailor. However, if you punish that woman, the public will gossip, and it will be bad for your reputation. He tremblingly advised Decarno so could we let it go this time? But Decarno felt something was amiss and immediately ordered, arrest those who leaked the information. Normally, news of an accident takes a month to reach here. He found it very strange that someone had leaked the news and that an ordinary sailor's family knew this information in advance. Evangeline O'Hara, the heir to the Merchant Guild, had only learned of this bad news through a letter received only a few days ago. This is truly illogical. His gaze was deep, lost in thought. There are only two possibilities. Someone survived and spread the news. Decarno continued, or someone under my command leaked the intelligence. The servant hastily defended himself, but it was definitely not me. Your Grace, please believe me. Decarno crossed his arms and urgently commanded, find out for me who spread the rumor of the Count's ship's sinking. The news was already in the papers today. The next day, newspaper headlines. Miss O'Hara causes commotion at the Merchant Guild, speculation surrounding Count O'Hara's death. Bad news about the O'Hara family spread throughout the empire. Newspapers were scattered on the table. Evangeline O'Hara looked at them, but at this moment, she just sighed calmly. After Decarno blocked the entrance and exit of the west wing of the mansion, the news spread quickly. I moved to live in the annex. She strolled through the quiet corridor. Evangeline O'Hara walked alone, thinking I thought I would feel frustrated not being able to go out, but living quietly alone like this isn't bad either. Evangeline O'Hara still felt something, but occasionally. Why does my chest ache like this? Was it because the familiar space now felt strange, that feeling of being a helpless existence? Suddenly, Evangeline O'Hara's face turned pale and she stared blankly ahead. Over there, that woman appeared. It was as if she were imprisoned, with outside eyes scrutinizing and cursing her. I told you. I said she was in the West Annex. Give me back my son. You must take responsibility. Those people kept insulting her, shouting at her. Come out. What kind of coward hides inside? How can you sleep when things are like this? My poor son. Do you know how much I invested in him? Evangeline O'Hara trembled all over, feeling scared. Open the door. Open the door. Why are they here? A stern voice rang out. "Stop it." They immediately fell silent, not daring to make a sound. It was Decarno Van Tiz. He approached and asked, "What's all the noise?" A man slowly explained, "You call this noise? We just came to demand legal compensation." Decarno Van Tiz asked suspiciously, "If you have business, you should enter through the main gate. Why come to the annex?" They tried to defend themselves, but Lord Decarno, he said loudly, "I don't want to hear any excuses." He turned around angrily and threatened, "To resolve this matter properly, I will call a lawyer." Those people dared not speak anymore, just silently lower their heads. Thank you, Your Grace." Decarno Van Tiz walked over to Evangeline O'Hara and asked with concern, "Why did you come out?" Evangeline O'Hara was frightened and flustered and immediately said, "I'm sorry, I'll go back right away." Decarno Van Tiz immediately put his arm around her. He looked sadly at her before him, understanding what had happened. But Evangeline O'Hara bit her lip, both uneasy and confused. Why isn't he saying anything? Such a commotion in front of the ducal mansion must make him feel ashamed, right? Is it because many people are watching? They walked together down the beautiful corridor, but their moods were anything but. Evangeline's heart was heavy with a mix of emotions. She couldn't comprehend his attitude of not demanding an apology when the honor of the ducal family had been tarnished, which she found strange. His concern. Returning to her room, Evangeline quietly entered, her mind racing, thinking this couldn't possibly be out of goodwill. She turned her head to look at him, but the door closed immediately, and Decarno Van Tiz left swiftly. That's right, it's impossible. But at that moment, Decarno Van Tiz was speaking with Count Leon. He asked with concern, "I heard the creditors caused a disturbance at the gates of the Tiz ducal mansion. When I looked out, I was stunned. It was very noisy, and the rumors are spreading too quickly." Decarno Van Tiz looked at him and replied coldly, "You knew about it long ago, yet you did nothing." Count Leon was taken aback, stammering evasively, "That's not important right now." Count Leon, the cousin of the late Duke. What's important is that the Duchess is burdened by debt, isn't it? Unexpectedly, he advised Decarno Van Tiz regarding the marriage. What Duchess? Do you really intend to marry her? But he answered very calmly, constantly mocking and despising them. When you received and used the things sent by the O'Hara family, you praised them as excellent, but now that the Count's assets have vanished, you immediately turn your backs on them. Decarno Van Tiz looked at them with disgust. Those who claimed to be collateral relatives of the Tiz family were truly disappointing. He said nonchalantly, "Isn't that obvious? I don't care what they say. The only person qualified to be the Duchess is Evangeline." Decarno Van Tiz remained resolute, not wavering in the slightest. "Isn't that obvious?" Count Leon was stunned, unable to understand. "What are you talking about?" He became unusually angry and said sharply, "No, this is unacceptable." He immediately said sarcastically, "Could it be that you've fallen in love with that woman? Everyone knows this marriage will harm the interests of the ducal family. For the sake of the family, why don't you annul the engagement?" Decarno Van Tiz looked at the people before him, able to guess all their intentions. On the surface, they feigned loyalty to the ducal family. Everyone coveted the position of family head they yearned for, inwardly scheming. Decarno Van Tiz knew what they were planning, to replace her with someone who would bring them benefits. The door was immediately opened. It was Evangeline. She peeked inside stealthily, observing the situation. The collateral relatives of the Tiz family had come, perhaps to discuss annulling the engagement. "With me." Evangeline lowered her head sadly, pondering, if it's not love, then what other reason could there be for you to be so stubborn? "Does Decarno love me?" But unexpectedly, he said, "I will still marry her." Decarno declared very seriously, "Because there is no woman more convenient than Evangeline." Evangeline, hearing this from outside, was shocked. What woman is more convenient? Those people smiled awkwardly. "If that's the reason, you can find a more suitable candidate. The royal family will also be concerned, as this is a matter of the Tiz ducal family." That's right, just as Count Leon said. Decarno Van Tiz, displeased, made an excuse to send them away. "I hate trouble. Let's end the conversation here." At this moment, Decarno Van Tiz was alone on the balcony, drinking, contemplating, and reminiscing. "I first met Decarno at a hunting banquet." Evangeline shyly bowed to Duke Decarno Van Tiz. She said to him hesitantly, I am very pleased to meet you. I am Evangeline O'Hara. Decarno Van, 'tis replied politely. I am also very pleased to meet you. Miss O'Hara. He spoke to Evangeline with his usual indifferent expression. I have long heard of Count O'Hara's great name. To others, it seemed like an ordinary and natural meeting, but it was almost like a meeting arranged by both families. Evangeline also remembered the circumstances of their meeting. Although my father didn't care much for hunting, he still spent money to obtain a membership card and took me to the banquet. In her eyes, he was always surrounded by people, while Decarno had reluctantly attended the banquet only at his mother's urging. Evangeline was accompanied by her father to that party, and it was at that time that the two began to get acquainted. Our eyes met just like that, and that's how we gradually became familiar with each other. We kept talking until I entered the Tiz ducal household, and he never once disappointed me. Not even once. Although he was always cold, Decarno Van Tiz had always cared for her. Was it because of that reason? At first, I believed that the two of us could understand each other, but then I realized he had no feelings for me. I immediately gave up on my dream. Even so, we were still engaged. I thought he must have had another reason for choosing me. But after hearing what he just said, because there is no woman more convenient than Evangeline, and that reason was because I was convenient. At this moment, Evangeline's heart sank. She dragged her feet back to her room in disappointment. So it was that insignificant reason. This marriage was always a union of money and power. Evangeline was completely devastated. She seemed to hold no hope for any emotional connection with him. So this wasn't surprising. She struggled to clench her hands, thinking, even so, the family is bankrupt, yet he still wants to keep me by his side. I thought his concern was genuine. I thought he recognized me. Evangeline O'Hara, my worth as a person, but it was all an illusion. She gently removed her wedding ring and placed it on the table. How pathetic. Evangeline looked despairingly at her reflection in the wall mirror, lamenting. What right does a commodity that has lost its value have to expect anything? Meanwhile, in Decarno's study, he was still sitting there, perhaps unaware that Evangeline had overheard him. Decarno was focused on his work. Count Leon's words still echoed in his ears. Could it be that you've fallen in love with that woman? Decarno put down his pen and chuckled. He then leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and mused. Love. Ridiculous. As I said, Evangeline O'Hara. Decarno thought of her. Very convenient. Evangeline's image appeared in his mind. She was elegant, rational, and adept at concealing her emotions. In Decarno's eyes, she was second to none, flawless. She handled people and situations with great tact. Evangeline was not only a beautiful and wealthy young lady, but also exceptionally talented, as her extensive knowledge always allowed her to create a comfortable atmosphere in conversations. She possessed all the qualities befitting the Duchess of Tiz. Evangeline was indeed beautiful and capable. Therefore, there was no more suitable marriage partner than Evangeline. Decarno Tiz opened his eyes, pondered, and affirmed everything about Evangeline. That's right, he thought. She's just a little hurt right now. She'll calm down soon. A servant immediately pushed open the door and entered. Is that so? Your Grace, you called for me. Yes. Decarno Tiz quickly signed some important documents and instructed the servant accordingly. Auction this off for me. The sales contract for the Roca Vineyard Plains, the Roca Plains. Michael was stunned upon seeing it. Selling that place will bring a huge loss to the family. You could consider other places. But Decarno Tiz had made up his mind. Do as I say. That is the most fertile land in the country, and many people have coveted it in the past. If auctioned, it will surely fetch a high price, and there will be a surplus after repaying the debt. Evangeline must fully become the Duchess, so this loss is nothing. A few days later, at the Belitz Imperial Palace. You look as if you're not coming back. How strange. A noble lady, seated in the middle, asked Count Leon, "What brings you here?" Count Leon was very cautious in front of the lady, stammering, "Not coming back. You misunderstand. A very beautiful woman. That was Her Highness the Princess, the sister of the Emperor of the Belitz Empire, Bologna von Fierish." 3 days before Count Leon's audience with the princess at Count Leon's mansion, a vase shattered on the floor. Count Leon's extremely furious voice rang out. Damn it, arrogant brat. He gritted his teeth, trembling with anger, unable to bear it. Does he think that his family is so powerful on its own? The power the Tiz ducal family now possessed was thanks to the collateral family members uniting to protect and maintain it. He incessantly cursed Decarno Tiz, but that brat doesn't know, and he's so smug, thinking he's so great. Count Leon continued. Moreover, he rejected the woman we arranged for him. This was our chance to get a piece of the pie. Unexpectedly, Count Leon disliked Evangeline so much that he disagreed with their marriage. Evangeline, I don't like that woman. I think she's a naive woman because she was spoiled by Count O'Hara. He recalled, feeling disgusted by her. Although she hasn't become the Duchess yet, her demeanor is exactly like the late Duchess, and the way she looks at me is the same way Decarno often looks at me. Count Leon slumped heavily into his chair, deciding he couldn't let this happen. He immediately began to plot. No, I must deal with them in one fell swoop. That's right, if I bring the imperial family into this. He schemed insidiously. Even just can't do much in the imperial palace. Well, Princess Bologna von Fierisch looked at Count Leon and asked, "What do you want from me? You didn't just come to ask how I'm doing, did you?" Count Leon immediately began to report fluently. "What is it? I just came to pay my respects to your highness, as I haven't seen you in a long time. As a member of the Tiz family, I should naturally serve the princess, but I am sorry I cannot do so now." The princess also knows that the Tiz family has been very chaotic recently. The princess said calmly, "Oh dear, really?" She continued to ask Count Leon, "Are the rumors about the O'Hara family's bankruptcy true?" Unexpectedly, the princess appeared extremely shocked and worried. "I'm worried Duke Tiz is not doing well. For the sake of the family's honor, it's also difficult for him to abandon Miss O'Hara." Seeing the princess's expression, Count Leon immediately thought that her attitude was completely different when she mentioned Decarno. It seemed everything was proceeding smoothly as he had anticipated. He immediately feigned confusion and stammered, "Actually, I'm also very worried." Unexpectedly, the princess lamented tearfully, "With things having turned out this way, it would be better for the Duke to break off the engagement with that woman. But perhaps the Duke is trying hard to maintain the relationship to save face." Count Leon looked at her with a triumphant expression. Exactly. Princess Bologna von Fierisch was not that simple. Unlike her cold appearance, the princess had a fiery temper and had to have whatever she wanted. It seemed the princess had been greatly enamored with Decarno Tiz since she first saw him. Decarno von Tiz. Her gaze was fixated on Decarno Tiz. Naturally, he became the object of her pursuit. The princess not only chased him at every event Duke Tiz attended, but also tearfully begged her brother, His Majesty the Emperor, to grant her marriage to the Duke. The princess made efforts and hoped to marry Decarno Tiz, pursuing him without hesitation. This was a well-known story in high society. Unfortunately, the emperor had no intention of granting the Duke more power and thus rejected his foolish sister's request. Even so, Bologna still coveted Decarno. Therefore, the princess was the best pawn to use. Count Leon understood this and secretly calculated, if I instigate her a little, making her feel she can still get what she wants, she will automatically go against Evangeline. He said, feigning concern, "So, Your Highness, what if we make Miss O'Hara break off the engagement herself?" She was very surprised to hear this. "What?" But then she asked hesitantly, "Is that woman easy to back down? Seeing how she clings, I don't think she'll give up easily." Count Leon smiled. "Of course it won't be easy. But isn't she also a woman with extremely high self-esteem?" The two exchanged a knowing smile. Who knows, if we hurt her pride, she might leave in a fit of anger. Count Leon and the princess conspired to drive a wedge between them. The next afternoon, in the princess's drawing room. "I'm sorry for inviting you so suddenly. I should have made an appointment in advance." "It's all right, Your Highness," Evangeline said to her Highness with a sorrowful expression. "Even so, it's fortunate that Your Highness summoned me while the Duke is away. Thanks to you, I was able to come out." The princess showed a somewhat sympathetic expression, "I see." But in reality, she was sizing Evangeline up. She's showing off that she's protected by Duke Tiz. Go on and be smug, it won't last long. The princess suddenly changed the subject and deliberately brought up Evangeline's situation. "I heard the news about the O'Hara family. You must be very upset that the Count met with such an accident." She not only fabricated things to tell Evangeline, they haven't even found the body yet. Hearing this, Evangeline went limp, her hands clasped tightly, trying hard to maintain her composure. Evangeline still managed to answer the princess. "Yes, we are still searching. Thank you for your concern." The princess looked at her, very curious. "What's wrong? I thought she would be teary-eyed. How come there's no reaction at all?" She pondered for a moment, then feigned sympathy towards Evangeline. She immediately said, "Actually, there's something I wanted to ask of you this time. I'm planning to host a ball to celebrate the safe return of the Navy, but I'm worried about Miss O'Hara's situation." Evangeline still calmly replied to the princess, "If I were to hold a celebratory banquet, would it be all right on your end?" "Of course, Your Highness." At this moment, as if with ominous intent, the princess deliberately said, "If you also plan to attend, then I have something I'd like to give you." She gestured to a maid. The maid immediately walked over to the princess with a box, and then said to Evangeline, "Here, take this." A series of evening gowns were taken out and displayed before Evangeline. Looking at the pile of gowns, her eyes became extremely sad. But the princess continued to speak deliberately. "I heard you're in a difficult situation, so I thought you might need some help." Evangeline looked at them, thinking, outdated gowns. Is she telling me to wear these? The princess continued to deliberately humiliate Evangeline. "Those are gowns I used to wear, but I already have new ones this year. Don't refuse me. We should help each other in times like these." She still pretended to smile happily and said amicably, "To save you face, I won't tell anyone." Evangeline lowered her head, silent, merely thinking. It seems Her Highness wants the future Duchess of the Tiz family to wear those old clothes again to humiliate her. The princess continued to attack Evangeline with those insincere words. "Miss O'Hara, if you misunderstand my good intentions, then why would I do this?" But contrary to the princess's thoughts, Evangeline calmly picked up her teacup and said gently, "Thank you for gifting me these gowns. I will make good use of them." Dealing with such childish provocations was purely a waste of time. Evangeline not only responded calmly, but also counterattacked and shattered the princess's malice. "And, in accordance with Your Highness's noble wishes, I will also keep this a secret. But if this matter reaches others' ears, it must be the doing of Your Highness's maid. I hope she is someone you can trust, Your Highness." Evangeline had always known that she didn't need to pay too much attention to their petty tricks. "At this moment, I have more to worry about than Your Highness." At this point, Evangeline immediately said seriously, "I think I cannot stay any longer. I must leave." She quickly stood up, curtsied to the princess, and didn't forget to pick up the suitcase, bowing her farewell. Thus, Evangeline, holding the gowns, solemnly bid farewell. "I will keep Your Highness's considerate care in mind." Suddenly, she widened her eyes and stared directly into the princess's eyes. "I will never forget it for the rest of my life." At this moment, the expressions of both the princess and the maid froze. The princess, both angry and unwilling to accept defeat, shouted, "What the hell? Why is she so unappreciative?" Returning to the ducal mansion, Duke Decarno immediately inquired about Evangeline's situation. "It seems you went out while I was away." Evangeline calmly replied to him, "How could I refuse an invitation from Her Highness the Princess?" She looked directly at him, her face etched with extreme sorrow and a lost, dazed expression. Duke Decarno extinguished the cigarette in his hand and sighed, "I understand. One more thing. The coachman followed behind and waited for you outside the Imperial Palace." The coachman waited for Miss Evangeline, but didn't see you come out and said you were missing. Duke Decarno frowned at this point, asking Evangeline with some concern, "Where did you go?" Outside the O'Hara family shop, a crowd of reporters had gathered, taking pictures, pushing and shoving, all waiting to get some valuable information. Evangeline immediately called for Philip and handed the suitcase she had taken from the princess to Mr. Philip. "Take this." He looked at them, surprised and confused. "Miss, what are these?" Evangeline opened the suitcase, which contained old gowns worn by the princess. Mr. Philip hadn't expected this and asked, "Why did you suddenly bring some gowns over?" She explained, immediately tearing off the jewels from the dress. "They're too old. I can't wear them. But the jewels on them can be used." Mr. Philip watched her do this, both surprised and worried, and also heartbroken. "Why? Where did these come from?" "Miss, please wait. If you tear them directly like this, your hand will get hurt." She said absently, "These are from the royal family. The jewels shouldn't be cheap. They must be quite valuable." Hearing this, Mr. Philip was heartbroken and couldn't bear to watch Mississippi. But Evangeline continued. "Philip," she held up the pile of jewels she had removed from the clothes and said to Philip, "Please sell these and then search for my father's whereabouts." But Mr. Philip immediately replied, "But His Grace the Duke is sending people everywhere to search." Evangeline couldn't believe it and said coldly, "That person wouldn't bother to look for my father." But when facing Duke Decarno, Evangeline didn't mention this matter, simply replying, "I felt a bit stuffy, so I went out for some fresh air." If I say I went to the Merchant Association, I'll have to mention those gowns and explain how I got them. That childish princess's malice. If I can find a glimmer of hope in it, I'm willing to accept it. But she thought to herself, if Decarno knew I was struggling so much just to survive. She was very unwilling to let him know that she was having a harder time than anyone else right now. I'd rather die. I'm sorry to have worried you. Duke Decarno was silent for a moment, looking at her, then continued to ask Evangeline. He probably sensed something was wrong and asked her, the princess. Duke Decarno hesitated somewhat. Did she insult you? That stubborn and arrogant princess, calling Evangeline over under such circumstances, definitely wasn't just for a friendly chat. Could it be that something unspeakably bad happened? But the answer he got was no, nothing happened. This surprised him. Evangeline continued, the princess just invited me to the upcoming royal banquet. He was somewhat suspicious, is that all? But Evangeline still answered firmly, yes. That's all. She said no more, her sorrowful expression still unchanged. Evangeline immediately turned to leave, only saying, if you have nothing else. I'll head back first. Seeing this, Duke Decarno quickly stood up, walked over to Evangeline, and tightly gripped her hand. Evangeline was startled and a little flustered. Duke Decarno said sternly to her, now I can see your expression. I don't like to use forceful means, but Evangeline frowned slightly, a little scared, but she still looked directly into Duke Decarno's eyes. Looking at her at this moment, Duke Decarno thought to himself, if I can strip off your mask, I won't hesitate. She sighed, then turned her face away. Evangeline said to him coolly, not tonight. Duke Decarno was stunned, somewhat confused. What? Evangeline lowered her head and continued, I'm a bit tired today. Please notify me in advance next time. Decarno felt uncomfortable and frowned. Do you really think I kept you here for that kind of thing? He recalled the moments he wanted to be close to Evangeline. He never forced her, always respected her, and was gentle with her. If I wanted to sleep with you, Decarno thought, I would have asked for your opinion as always. This kind of moment was truly uncomfortable. Evangeline covered her face with her hands, her voice weary, and said to Decarno, I'm sorry, but today, I really. Decarno immediately changed the subject, telling her, get ready for the princess's banquet. Evangeline looked at him in surprise. Decarno looked at Evangeline's face at that moment. That's right, you're expressing your emotions now. I can feel that you're alive. Attending a normal social party is enough to attract everyone's attention. Decarno continued to think. What's more, this is a royal banquet full of nobles. For you, this is a very difficult decision. So, if you don't want to attend the banquet now, that's also fine. Evangeline nodded gently and replied obediently, yes, I will prepare. Then Evangeline immediately withdrew her hand from his. Decarno was surprised. She immediately said to him seriously and coldly, I'll be leaving first. Decarno could only reluctantly nod in agreement. After Evangeline left, Decarno breathed a sigh of relief. He took something out from his person, looked at it, and said, as expected. Decarno pondered his own feelings and said, empty. Early in the morning, in the spacious and magnificent mansion, Evangeline wore a beautiful and sparkling white dress. Unknowingly, the day of the royal banquet had arrived. So stuffy. But Evangeline's mood at this time could not be calmed. She bowed uneasily. Evangeline's chest felt as if it was being pressed by something heavy. I feel very uncomfortable, but I can't run away. But Evangeline was still strong. She clenched her hands and said to herself, you must smile, Evangeline. There was a knock on the door from outside. Evangeline immediately composed herself and said, please come in. Evangeline hurriedly finished her makeup and quickly replied, I'm almost ready. Can you help me with the clasp at the back? A familiar voice rang out, this one. Ah. Evangeline was startled and turned around. Duke. She was surprised as he was already standing behind her. Decarno quickly grabbed her dress sash and casually urged, stand straight. It's getting late. Time to go. Evangeline shrank back in embarrassment and stopped, saying, wait a moment. Decarno still said calmly, what's wrong? It's not like it's the first time we've met. Evangeline was very confused as to why he suddenly appeared here. Evangeline was very nervous. I've been trying to avoid him all this time. Why did he have to come find me when I'm changing? Decarno said gently to Evangeline, can you gather your hair to the back? Yes. He was very gentle and considerate. Decarno zipped up the dress. Decarno gently caressed the fair skin on her back. His hand rested on her shoulder, his gaze deep and fascinated as he said, it suits you very well. Evangeline just lowered her head calmly and replied, thank you. Decarno quickly turned to get something. He immediately took out a sparkling diamond necklace and said to Evangeline, "This necklace will go well with you." A large diamond necklace, very meticulously and exquisitely made. But Decarno still said gently, "This is too flashy. Without it, everyone is already staring at you." Then he approached her and called out, "Evangeline." Hearing that affectionate voice, Evangeline was somewhat surprised. Decarno placed the necklace around Evangeline's neck, a hint of sadness on his face. Then he comfortingly said to Evangeline, "This is something you have to experience once, so go there and make them unable to take their eyes off you ever again." He gently placed the necklace around Evangeline's neck. Evangeline reached out and gently touched the necklace, thinking with some emotion, "I didn't expect this person to say the same thing as my father." Decarno looked at her troubled eyes and couldn't help but say, "If you have something to say, just say it." But Evangeline remained stubborn, feigning calmness. "It's not like that." Decarno immediately consoled, "If you don't want to go now, we." But unexpectedly, Evangeline turned around and said firmly to Decarno, "No, I will go." Evangeline smiled gently, seeming prepared, and answered confidently, "I'm ready." At this time in the Imperial Palace, this is the first time I've seen so many people attend the princess's banquet. The invited guests had all arrived, and they kept discussing. Indeed, imitating the ducal family's banquet is still the same old thing. Actually, isn't there something more worth looking forward to than that banquet? That's right. Will they really come to the banquet? At this moment, the servant immediately announced loudly, "Duke and his fiancée, Miss O'Hara, have arrived." Everyone in the room suddenly fell silent, completely quiet, turned around, and stared intently. A beautiful sight appeared. It was Decarno and Evangeline, walking side by side, very intimately, truly a match made in heaven. The two of them still appeared very calm, under everyone's scrutinizing gaze. Decarno and Eva walked among the crowd. They looked at Eva, gossiping about her. Miss O'Hara actually came after going bankrupt. Isn't this her first time attending such an event? They sized her up from head to toe, chattering and discussing. "Look at that necklace. My goodness, even in such dire straits, she's still so extravagant." The two of them gradually approached the center of the banquet. Decarno tilted his head slightly to look at Eva. Everyone watched and admired. It seemed the two of them had a very good relationship. He gently called her Evangeline. When they were still at the mansion, Decarno had held Eva tightly to comfort her. "No matter what others say, you are still a member of the Tish family." He held her waist tightly. Decarno brought his face close to Eva and instructed her, "So, don't forget your role." But Eva wasn't happy at all. She felt his tone was sharp. She didn't know what made him angry. Eva looked up at him and just replied coldly, "You don't need to worry," Eva said. "I will do everything I can to prevent you from suffering any further harm." Decarno looked at her, somewhat worried. Then she turned to the dukes over there and deliberately pushed him away. "You should go, Duke. They seem to be waiting for you." Decarno immediately turned and left. At this moment, as soon as he was gone, those people began to whisper and mock Eva. "My goodness, look at her arrogant demeanor, holding her head high. I thought she would dress more plainly to show remorse." It seems the position of Duchess Tish is really good, just standing there, not having to care about anyone. They look down on her, laughing mockingly. "So what if she does nothing? Duke Tish will always settle her debts for her anyway." Someone else said, "He sold Rothschild's aircraft for his fiancée." Hearing this, Eva immediately became somewhat agitated. She was startled. They continued to discuss. "I can't believe it. Isn't that the land of the Duke Tish family since its founding? Just because he's marrying an unsuitable person, it's become so chaotic now." At this point, Eva seemed to gradually lose her composure. She gritted her teeth, puzzled. What are they talking about? Eva immediately sensed something was wrong. She thought to herself, high society rumors are usually not very accurate, but they mentioned a specific place. Eva looked towards a woman and recognized her. That woman was the wife of a count who frequently attended auctions. She watched her discussing and thought to herself, then the possibility of them lying is very low. She inadvertently saw Eva looking over and immediately mocked. "Oh, what's wrong? Is the young lady eavesdropping on us?" She and the others deliberately spoke without restraint, wanting to embarrass Eva. So what if you heard? We're not making things up. That's right. But Eva wouldn't let them succeed. She still replied calmly, huh? They were stunned by Eva's attitude. Yes, unexpectedly, Eva remained composed and could even smile and say naturally, that must be it then. At this moment, everyone present was extremely shocked. My goodness, what kind of tone is that? That's right, this is the princess's banquet. No matter how urgent the situation, etiquette should be maintained. Eva immediately replied, sternly in a sharp voice, that sentence should be directed at the ladies. You are the ones who should maintain etiquette towards me. They were greatly surprised, but still tried to feign ignorance. What? You're not the Duchess. Why should we do that? Eva said bluntly, if I, the biggest entertainment of this banquet, leave here early because of the ladies. At this moment, her eyes filled with triumph and sarcasm. She looked at them and said, that wouldn't you be in trouble? If you want Her Highness the Princess's banquet to conclude smoothly, then you have to find a way to keep me here for a long time, right? Those people became angry out of shame. Shameless. There's no one here who doesn't know your situation, yet you don't restrain yourself. She looked directly at them and asked coldly, well then, do I owe the ladies anything? Eva looked at them, convinced that even if she didn't know the exact list of creditors, no one here had ever knocked on the door of the NX building. She continued without hesitation. So, at least at this banquet, I don't have to apologize to anyone. Seeing that not only had she failed to embarrass Eva, but was instead turned upon, the woman's face turned red with anger. I have committed no sin here. Eva found this game of idle gossip boring and turned to leave. No one answered anything. I'm not interested anymore. They watched her uneasily. How could this be? Unexpectedly, at this moment, someone watching from the side couldn't help but burst out laughing. Men were gathered at a table behind, laughing quietly and conversing casually. I won the bet. Give me the money quickly. Can't be helped. We saw a special performance. As expected, everyone has some designs on Miss O'Hara, because she suddenly appeared and took the Duchess's position. So this is also understandable. Viscount Chloe, holding a cigarette, chuckled mockingly and carelessly. She's no ordinary woman. She lived with the late Duchess Tiz, who was known for being strict and meticulous, right? As soon as he finished speaking, he laughed excitedly, like a flower blooming on a cliff. I've been waiting for the day it withers. But no one responded to him. Their faces turned pale with fear. Viscount Chloe asked in confusion, what's wrong with everyone? Unexpectedly, Decarno Tiz had walked up behind him, his face extremely furious at this moment. Viscount Chloe was startled awake and looked up in horror, Duke. But Decarno Tiz said nothing, did nothing, and simply turned and left. The remaining people were very surprised and, at the same time, relieved as they watched him. At this moment, Decarno Tiz had already sat down in a chair. Then a man approached and said, everyone has been waiting for you to arrive. They forced a smile out of fear. You also know we are not interested in this gathering. We came to see you. Viscount Chloe only then dared to look up at him, guessing he hadn't heard. He tried to deflect, starting to speak to Decarno Tiz. After you adjusted the central bank's interest rates, I was finally relieved. Decarno Tiz, holding a cigarette, gently tapped the ash onto the table and said calmly, is that so? Viscount Chloe still said humbly, of course, not just me, but all the nobles in Rodka. He saw Decarno Tiz and suddenly realized his cigarette was about to burn out. Immediately bowing, trying to please him, Duke, I'll have someone bring an ashtray. Decarno Tiz said coldly, no need. Decarno Tiz unexpectedly pressed the cigarette but firmly onto his hat, making him look panicked. Decarno Tiz ground the cigarette but forcefully, burning the hat. Then he said, Viscount Chloe. Decarno Tiz glared at him and said sarcastically, I despise it when people touch what belongs to me. Viscount Chloe turned pale with fright. It's not what you think. Decarno Tiz threatened coldly. If there's a next time, I will not spare you. His sharp eyes looked at him, warningly. No matter who it is, not only Viscount Chloe, but even the people sitting around broke out in a cold sweat, not daring to speak. Viscount Chloe stammered, yes, Duke. After dealing with them, Decarno Tiz sat quietly in his chair. Then someone announced, Her Highness the Princess has arrived. Decarno Tiz immediately opened his eyes and looked towards her. Eva stood upstairs, watching. Her Highness the Princess made a magnificent entrance. She smiled and waved at the crowd. She walked in with arrogance and confidence. The crowd looked at the princess, full of praise. Hello, princess. You look beautiful today as well. Eva stood upstairs looking down. She stood there sadly, with mixed emotions. Eva at this moment remembered the gossip she had heard earlier. The Duke sold Rothschild's plane through a lawyer. That money must have been used to pay off debts. Bringing an unsuitable person into the family. That's why it's so chaotic now. She couldn't understand and was stunned. Decarno sold Rothschild. At this moment, Eva's heart was filled with self-blame. Was it really to pay off my debts? But I didn't know anything, and I even complained about him, thinking he was a cold and heartless person. She seemed unable to suppress her emotions any longer and covered her face sadly. I thought he didn't care about my feelings and situation. Does he care about me? Eva felt deeply ashamed for implicating Decarno Tiz. Now, I don't know how to face him. There was a knock on the door from outside. Eva flinched and glanced over. Eva quickly wiped away her tears and said, "Wait a moment, I'll be right there." She composed herself and walked out calmly. "Come in." A familiar voice called her name. Eva. Eva was stunned. "Kalin." "Yes, it's me, Eva." Kalin Rebel, the second son of Count Rebel's family. Before her was a radiant, blonde-haired man, standing in front of her, greeting her happily. At this moment, Eva looked at ease and happy. "How come you're here? I heard that a warship docked at the port recently. It seems you came at that time, right?" Kalin Rebel answered cheerfully and energetically. "That's right. If I arrived earlier than scheduled, I wanted to attend your birthday banquet, to give you a surprise." Eva was surprised. "I didn't expect you to remember my birthday." She suddenly thought of her father. At this moment, Kalin Rebel unexpectedly saw Eva looking absent-minded and asked with concern, "What's wrong, Eva?" She tried to calm herself. "Really, how could I think of father because of those words?" Eva immediately smiled brightly, hiding her current emotions. "Nothing. More importantly, I'm glad you arrived here safely." But Kalin Rebel probably knew everything. He spoke words of comfort to her sadly. "Eva, on my way here, I heard about Count O'Hara. I'm very sorry I couldn't be by your side during your most difficult time. You must have been very sad. Are you okay now?" Eva looked up at him, feeling reassured and calm. This was exactly what she hoped to hear. Her expression brightened a little as she replied to Kalin Rebel, "I'm much better now. Thank you for your concern." She could finally breathe a little easier, no longer having to hide her emotions, which made her feel so relieved. Eva then recalled, "I first met Kalin when I was about 10 years old in the territory of Addis on the eastern continent. A boy approached, offering Eva a cup of water, saying, 'Would you like a drink?' Eva was still a little girl then. The boy from the rebel family said to Eva, 'It's very hot here in Addis, so you'll feel tired. Whenever I feel tired like you, I drink this water.' Eva replied to him happily, 'Thank you.' The little girl gently extended her hand and accepted the cup of cool water. Kalin was the son of Count Rebel, the governor of Addis. Because he couldn't adapt to the high temperatures in Addis, he often took care of me. Little Eva took a sip of water and felt refreshed and very happy. It's delicious. In that place, we were once the best of friends. Later, I returned to my country, and Kalin joined the Navy. I thought it would be difficult to see him again." Eva and Kalin Rebel were on the floor, happily reminiscing about the past as they met again, unaware that Decarno Tiz was standing downstairs observing them both. "Kalin, it's so good to see you again." At this moment, Decarno's face showed that he was very uncomfortable. Just then, Her Highness the Princess immediately approached Duke Decarno. "So you are here?" The princess looked at him, blushing shyly, and said, "I was very surprised to learn that your grace would also be attending my banquet." Decarno Tiz and the princess stood opposite each other, conversing. "Actually, it's rather embarrassing for Miss O'Hara to attend this banquet, so I thought your grace would be absent." Enduring the gazes of others is her concern. She thought smugly, just as I expected. Judging by the way he speaks, the Duke isn't on that woman's side either. Then she put on an act, deliberately saying, "I also agree with your grace's view." Decarno Tiz calmly said to the princess, "It is the responsibility of a noble to solve their own problems." But she noticed that although he was speaking, he wasn't looking at her. Where on earth was he looking? The princess couldn't help but look up as well. There was no one on the second floor. She then turned her head back, only to find, unexpectedly, that Decarno Tiz seemed to be very angry about something. He was gripping his wine glass so tightly that the glass cracked. The princess was flustered. "Duke, are you all right?" Decarno Tiz stumbled slightly and said hurriedly, "I'm sorry, princess. It seems I used a bit too much force in my hand." He slowly took out a towel to wipe it and continued, turning to the princess, "If you please, let's continue our earlier conversation. Your Highness was speaking of the responsibilities of a noble, correct?" After the princess's banquet ended, it was difficult to find Decarno because I was a burden to him. Eva walked alone, thinking aimlessly and sadly. At this moment, Eva's heart was heavy, and her mind raced with incessant, chaotic thoughts. "I don't know why I can feel it," she thought, sensing her current situation. Decarno's attitude is even colder than before. Since my father disappeared after that storm, I've been living for myself, so it's only natural that I've noticed a change in his attitude. Eva stopped by the window, looking inside with sadness and helplessness. Is this what Decarno wants? Not being able to understand his thoughts confuses me. But if he wants to use the ducal family's assets to get rid of his responsibility, then, at this, Eva clenched her hands, making a decision. I can't keep running away like this anymore. She quickly left, moving very fast. This time, I'll try to talk to him first. Decarno was sitting in his room, drinking tea and reading a newspaper. When he saw her enter, he asked gently, "Evangeline, you came to see me. How strange." She replied, "I have something to say." He seemed busy with work and interrupted her. "Sit down first." A maid approached Eva and said, "Let me pour you some tea." At this, Eva felt worried and somewhat uneasy. It had been a long time since I had met Decarno alone, and a long time since anyone had served me like this. Her hand was trembling as she held the teacup. This situation is too strange. Eva stammered the tea. It seems the Duke has been very busy lately. What should I do?" Eva felt extremely uncomfortable, sweating and not knowing where to begin. "Because I'm nervous, I can't think of anything. He is a man whose schedule is precise down to the minute." Decarno looked at her and noticed something was amiss. Then he said, "I don't think this is what you wanted to say." Eva hurriedly stood up to leave, not daring to look him in the eye, thinking only, this man hates trouble. "I'll stop here for today. Next time No, seeing that you're all right, I'll head back first." Suddenly, he quickly grabbed Eva's hand and called her name, Evangeline. Decarno sensed it and said, "You're trembling." She could only sit down again and hurriedly explained, "I'm sorry, I'm not unwell anywhere. I don't know why this is happening." Decarno also said with some concern, "Sit for a while before you go." Eva looked at him and nodded obediently. She carefully observed his face at that moment, feeling that his expression and way of speaking were still the same as usual, not angry, but also without sympathy. Decarno's hand was still holding Eva's tightly, but I, on the contrary, felt very reassured. It seemed coming here was the right decision. Outside the window, snow was also gradually falling. Eva slowly withdrew her hand, quickly freeing it from his grasp. Eva felt a bit more comfortable and said gently, "I'm fine now. Thank you for your concern." Decarno still replied coolly, "It's good that you're fine." Eva, holding her teacup, asked, "Will you be late tomorrow as well?" He looked at her and replied, "Perhaps. I plan to pay a visit to His Majesty, as His Majesty's schedule is often irregular." After hearing this, Eva continued, "If you go to see His Majesty, this time you will surely discuss the landscape gardening business project as well." She recalled, "I heard the ladies at the princess's banquet say that although the scale is not large, it is a business project recruited by the royal family, and it seems many nobles want to secure this project." He looked at her and nodded calmly. "That's right. They will soon review the participants. I'm really looking forward to seeing which family will win this project and decorate the roads." At this moment, Decarno thought to himself, "How long has it been since the two of us chatted so comfortably?" Looking at her, who was in a good mood, and chatting casually at this moment, he thought, it's like going back to the past. The two were once very comfortable, like a couple deeply in love. That's right, we used to talk directly, and she never hesitated to express her feelings. Decarno was also very considerate and gentle towards Eva. "You look cold. Let's go inside." Decarno's hand once held hers tightly, gradually shortening the distance. He pulled her, like a true lover, even though they were not yet married. But neither of them hesitated to express their love and affection for each other. "We have fulfilled our marital duties, and the relationship is not bad. But now the two have become distant, becoming awkward when sitting opposite each other. Although the current relationship has become awkward, if I take the initiative to try like this time, I can mend our relationship." Suddenly, Eva said, "Because you said you'd be late, I have something I want to ask you." She said shyly, "Can I invite a guest to the mansion?" "Actually, I recently met an old friend at a banquet. We haven't seen each other for a long time, so I want to chat more." She wanted to ask for Decarno's permission. "I think it's better to invite that friend here rather than going out." He immediately understood, feeling somewhat uneasy. Decarno immediately thought of Kalin Rebel and said unhappily, "That fellow said he wanted to see where you live." Eva nodded yes, but then Eva hurriedly explained, "No, Kalin didn't mean that. It was me." Decarno interrupted, "You, a person who is about to become a duchess, actually remember the name of an ordinary naval officer." Decarno showed a frustrated and slightly jealous expression, asking her, "It seems you two are quite close." Eva stammered in panic, What are you talking about? Kalin is just a friend. He was the only one who talked to me at the banquet that day. Decarno, annoyed, deliberately said to Eva, "Do you think that fellow talked to you out of kindness? You still don't understand the ways of the world." Hearing this, Eva was very hurt and disappointed, her voice devoid of emotion. Decarno is no different from usual, but why do I feel so upset? Eva immediately looked at him and said yes. She put down her teacup and said, "You're right." Eva lowered her head somewhat sadly, pretending to be calm, and said, "I am immature." Eva immediately turned to leave. "I'm sorry for talking nonsense. The tea is finished. I'll get up first." Decarno also hurriedly called out to her, "Wait, Evangeline." Eva bowed and said resentfully, "I won't invite guests anymore. You don't have to worry." She immediately turned and walked away. "All right, I'll leave now." Eva felt very uncomfortable and extremely frustrated, even though she had now lost all honor and wealth. But sadness enveloped her again. He actually suspects me, the person who has tried to fulfill the duties of a duchess for years, of maintaining a secret relationship with a friend. Eva's body trembled, unable to control herself. Eva walked quickly, her heart feeling as if it were being twisted by a knife. I thought that as long as I tried, we could get along harmoniously. Hurrying back to her room, everything was my imagination. Eva rushed to the window, thinking resentfully, what on earth am I dedicating myself to? She pounded on the window, forcefully, venting her emotions. In this prison-like place, what is my youth? Eva collapsed against the glass. This time, it was really beyond her limit of endurance. A place where no one was on her side. Just then, a maid knocked on the door and said, "Miss, may I come in?" Eva hurriedly turned around and wiped away her tears. The maid brought in a tray of food and comforted her, saying, "You look so pale." She gently said to Eva, "I'll bring the hot soup and tea first." Eva immediately asked the maid, "Did the Duke order you to do this?" "Yes." Eva immediately turned and refused. The maid said in a panic, "Ah, milady, I don't want to eat." Eva walked to the small table, sat down, and wrote something. Then she quickly took out a letter and handed it to the maid. "Help me deliver this to Fifth Avenue Milks." "Yes, milady." Watching the maid's retreating figure, Eva seemed to know clearly that the letter would also reach Decarno's hands. She stood there watching with a sad expression. "This also saves me the trouble of privately notifying him to cancel the appointment." Eva turned around wearily, her heart heavy as she slowly walked back to her bed. Eva collapsed onto the bed, thinking to herself, "It's strange. Because the family has fallen, I'm shunned by everyone, and I can't even see my old friends." She lay down, feeling sad because of Decarno's words earlier. "Even the man who is about to become my husband unreasonably misunderstands me. Even so, I'm no longer angry. Perhaps I've reached my limit." Eva dreamed hazily, dreaming of her father whom she missed dearly. Those warm words echoed. "Evangeline, even if you fall into the worst situation, don't give up. You've hit rock bottom now. You must overcome it." Her father's kind face appeared like a ray of light, helping her endure everything. "Father," Eva curled up in fear. "When will I ever overcome all this?" The night was deep, and a bright moon hung high, its clear light covering the land. A maid walked into Eva's room, carrying a box. She shook Eva awake and called out, "Milady, there's a letter. Wake up quickly." Eva sat up, looked at her, and asked, "Is the Duke back?" But the maid shook her head and said, "Not yet. I'm here to deliver a message." The maid held up the wooden box and said to Eva, "A guest from the Merchant Guild came here. That person said they don't trust anyone under the Duke, so they instructed me to deliver this to you personally." The maid handed it to Eva and added, "This is what you asked for." Eva looked at the box, very nervous. Was this sent by Philip? Eva opened the lid with trembling hands. "If this is what I asked for, could it be?" At this moment, Eva stared blankly inside. She was stunned, unable to believe it. Inside the box was a mud-stained shoe and a button I had chosen, my father's tragic mementos. At this time, in his room, Decarno was holding a piece of paper and reading it carefully. Unexpectedly, it was intelligence sent to Decarno regarding the sinking of Count O'Hara's ship. Count O'Hara accident site. No news of survivors. Shipwreck fragments found, but items cannot be guaranteed. Decarno read carefully and kept thinking. The situation is not optimistic. Don't expect too much. As I expected, it's not easy to survive such an accident. It can be assumed that Count O'Hara is dead. Then he immediately threw the notice into the fire. Decarno then turned and said, "Next, His Majesty." Two servants quickly reported to Decarno. "Miss O'Hara asked us to deliver this letter to Fifth Avenue. Milks." Decarno then took it out and read it. Just as Eva had thought, this was the letter Evangeline was going to send. If it's Fifth Avenue Milks. He immediately read the contents of the letter. "Dear Kalin." Eva wrote to Kalin, "Because some unexpected things have happened, I may not be able to keep our appointment. I will contact you as soon as possible. Please wait for me. I hope you stay healthy and remember to eat well. Evangeline O'Hara." Decarno watched, feeling uncomfortable in his heart. As expected, it's addressed to that so-called friend. At this moment, Decarno suddenly remembered the moment he spent with Eva. Even if it was just holding hands for a moment, I could still feel that she was thinner than before. With such a physique, she was actually still concerned about the health of a healthy naval officer. The look in Eva's eyes that Decarno saw was filled with emotion and sadness. How absurd. He took the letter, immediately sat up, and without hesitation, threw the letter straight into the fireplace. "Evangeline, from the moment I chose you to be the Duchess, every move you make is connected to the Tiz surname. There's no reason for you not to understand the meaning of this." A trace of sadness flashed in his eyes. "From the moment I was born into the Tiz family, my destiny was set, endowed with wealth and fame. But with that came the obligations and rules I had to follow, who to talk to, where, and how many times to laugh, even changing the hierarchy of the nobility. I've been suffocated by that heavy pressure since I was a child. From the time Decarno Tiz was young, he had to live and act according to the restrictive rules of the family. Then those rules and obligations gradually became me without my realizing it. Even if there was no longer a Decarno Tiz of the previous generation, I could still stand tall as a member of the Tiz family. I had become someone who only knew how to pursue prosperity for the family and the empire. Then I met you, someone suitable to be the perfect Duchess, the only one who could understand that burden. That's what I used to think." The letter Eva wrote gradually burned to ashes. Just then, a servant came in to report to Decarno Tiz. "Your Grace, I have brought the list you mentioned." He handed Decarno Tiz a list and said, "Among the guests who attended the banquet that day, these are the people who spoke with Miss O'Hara. Only the one who is said to be a friend was well-intentioned. The rest were not." Decarno Tiz looked at the list, frowning with displeasure. "But you already anticipated they were people from Her Highness the Princess's side. Furthermore, I've also heard that this time the nobles are also participating in the bidding for the landscape development project, and the person directly in charge is Her Highness the Princess." He hesitantly said to Decarno Tiz, "Perhaps the nobles believe that by provoking Miss O'Hara, they can win the bid and gain Her Highness the Princess's favor." Decarno Tiz immediately asked sternly, "When does His Majesty begin the Eastern tour?" "Yes, Your Grace, in 3 days." "So the reward for accompanying the tour is the operating rights for this landscape project." Meanwhile, she sat alone in her room, still constantly thinking about her story with him. Father is gone. It's time to give up hope and longing. Eva looked dazed, her face etched with despair, her hands still tightly clutching the box containing her father's last mementos. As father's daughter, the last thing I must do. 3rd Avenue, row F, number 30. Tetron. She bent down and picked up a small note from the table. "I've decided. Father's remains will be placed in the Paupers Cemetery, an area of about 6.6 square meters. Anyone who sees it will think I'm unfilial, but few people pay attention there, so I can rest in peace there. An unmarked grave is better than burying him in my heart." At this moment, Eva shed tears of sorrow, a teardrop trickling down her cheek. After all that has happened, Father traveled extensively and met countless people. Yet in the end, I can't expect anyone to attend the funeral. Eva collapsed to the floor in despair. The death of someone who has lost everything is so lonely. The Duke's luggage is on the other side. Hey, put it there. If the Duke sold the Tiz family's heirloom Rodka aircraft to pay off my debts, then could I call him? Eva's eyes were filled with sorrow and thoughts. Is it possible? I have a feeling that if I let him know I'm not alone, he could rest in peace. A servant tried to stop Eva. "Miss O'Hara, what's wrong?" "To the main building. You can't just barge in like this." Seeing him from afar, Eva hurriedly shouted, "Decarno." He immediately turned around and saw her rushing towards him, calling his name. "Evangeline." Decarno Tiz asked urgently, "What's wrong?" Eva then said, I have something to ask you. Next Friday, do you have time? Hearing this, he was somewhat surprised. She anxiously pleaded with him, there's something I want to do with you that day. If I say I'm holding a funeral, I don't know how people will gossip. Please, just this one request. I hope you can come. But he said bluntly, I'm sorry, I can't that day. Decarno touched his forehead, explaining to her in confusion. Starting today, I have to escort His Majesty for about a week's journey. But Eva still asked him sadly, do you absolutely have to go? Of course, because it's a royal matter. He looked at her sad face, then glanced at the group of servants, thinking, there are too many people here. Continuing this conversation will be bad for her. Decarno immediately turned to leave, but still tried to comfort her. You go rest first. If I'm lucky, I'll be back in time, and I'll come find you then. Eva immediately grabbed his sleeve, pleading wait. She still tried to implore him, Tetron 3rd Avenue. If you can make it back in time, please come there. Eva said very seriously to Decarno, this is my first and last time. I'm begging you, if you grant this request, I will live the rest of my life according to your wishes. She pleaded pitifully. But at this moment, he probably didn't understand her intentions, only worrying, why is Evangeline being so stubborn today? What if the servants see this and bad rumors spread? Decarno, he gently pushed her hand away and only replied, you go back first. Then he quickly turned and left, leaving her standing there alone, only saying, I will remember. Decarno mused, I cannot arbitrarily change His Majesty's schedule, nor can I let others see such a weak attitude. If you have already decided to bear the name. Eva's sorrowful figure stood there, watching his retreating back. Go, you will surely understand me. West entrance, the annex of the ducal residence. A carriage was parked in front of the door. The gatekeeper saw it and immediately stepped forward to stop it. Please halt. They shouted loudly. You cannot go out. Evangeline peeked out, got off the carriage, and asked the gatekeepers why. They stammered that the entrance to the annex was blocked and asked her to return. But Evangeline didn't give up and immediately ordered. The annex is the property passed down through generations of duchesses, and the duchess decides everything on this land. Put away your spears and open the gate. He hesitated and said, but you are not married yet. Then you should let me out even more. Evangeline said calmly, according to your words, I have no relationship with this family. The two gatekeepers looked at each other awkwardly, thinking, what should we do now? But the Duke. Evangeline immediately reassured them. That's the point, the Duke already knows I'm going out. Don't worry. Open the gate. Then the gate gradually opened. I've already told Decarno, so it should be fine to go out like this. At least no one can stop me this time. She thought as she sat in the carriage. Because today is the day I hold my father's funeral. The carriage sped away, and she arrived at a desolate and remote cemetery. Outside, Philip had already dug the grave and was waiting for her early. When he saw the carriage arrive, he hurried over. Miss. He helped her out of the carriage. Evangeline said, Philip. He looked at her with concern. It's been a long time. During the time I haven't seen you, Miss seems to have lost a lot of weight. But Evangeline just nodded slightly, got out of the carriage and said, I'm fine. More importantly, she looked at the desolate cemetery with a heavy heart. This place. Philip looked at her sadly and replied, this is a place where people without relatives are often buried. No one would have thought that the Count's grave would be placed here. Evangeline hugged the box in her arms tightly, thinking, that's right, if it's this place, the creditors won't find it. Take me to my father, Philip. He immediately led her away. Following Philip, she stopped at a small corner. She looked. This is at Mississippi. Her father's grave could only be such a hastily dug, simple small pit. Philip then said to her, I'd already dug the grave before you arrived. Evangeline grabbed a handful of soil and observed it. The soil is cold and damp. Looking at the handful of soil, she remembered her father. I learned from my father how to identify a good piece of land by its soil. The scene of him gently guiding her came to mind. Whether a piece of land is good or not, you can tell immediately by looking at its soil. With moderate rainfall, it is conducive to life. Evangeline bit her lip in pain and helplessness. If I could, I would also want to take my father to such a place full of sunshine and warmth. Father, I'm sorry. Philip looked at the sky and said worriedly, Miss, I think we need to hurry. It's about to rain. If it rains, it will be difficult for us to bury him properly. Evangeline hurriedly opened the box. I'll do it right away. It will only take a moment. Suddenly, he saw the shoelace in her hand and asked curiously, Miss, isn't that the patriarch's shoelace? She nodded and explained, I wanted to keep something of my father's. Then she immediately handed him the box. Here, bury it. Philip slowly took the box and placed it in the pit. Then he slowly shoveled soil with a spade to cover it. She watched, unable to hide her reluctance. Evangeline held the wooden tombstone she had made for her father, offering all her love and respect to the best father. Then she said to Philip, "Thank you, Philip. You can go back first." He turned around and asked her, "Yes, aren't you going back, Mississippi?" "Yes, I'll stay a little longer." The sky gradually darkened, and black crows perched on the tall trees. Evangeline still stood there, gazing at her father's grave for a long time. A simple grave, with a simple wooden tombstone stuck in it. She stood there, saying softly, "Father, you really enjoyed sailing around the world, didn't you? Well, please leave the traces of your life here, and then leave freely." Along with this rain, the heavy rain kept falling. Evangeline stood in the rain, saying softly, "Father, don't worry about me." She struggled to say, "Because I have that person by my side. Maybe today he will come here, because I have already asked him." Evangeline still stood there, waiting for him to come. The rain also washed away her tears. Evangeline said her last words to her beloved father. "So don't worry about me. Go in peace, Father. Even if Father is gone, I will live very proudly and strongly." The rain fell harder, and the thunder rumbled loudly. Suddenly, the sound of a carriage rushing came from a distance in the rain. Evangeline still stood in front of her father's grave. In the heavy rain, a carriage galloped over. Footsteps approached Evangeline. She thought, "These footsteps are... could it be?" She hurriedly turned around. Decarno, a man holding an umbrella, stood there. Evangeline said happily, "You really came." That man called her name, Evangeline. Eva tried hard to say, "Thank you for coming at this time." In a mining city far north of East Thunberg, before a lavishly set table, everyone was extremely happy. A man laughed happily. "I am truly a fortunate man." Marquis Bandel, the Lord of Thunberg, not only discovered a gem mine in his territory, but also had the opportunity to have an audience with His Majesty like this. Then he tasted the food with his fork. Emperor Belitz was seen comfortably eating and chatting with the Lord of Thunberg. "It seems to me that you welcome the person next to me more." Aiden von Belitz, the Emperor of the Belitz Empire, then turned to Decarno Tiz and asked, "Duke Tiz, what do you think?" But he merely replied coldly, "Not at all." The Emperor leaned over and deliberately whispered to Decarno Tiz, "Don't be so stiff. Pay more attention to others. Don't you feel sorry for making someone worry like that?" At this moment, a beautiful young lady opposite him was blushing shyly, looking at Decarno Tiz. Decarno Tiz quickly refused. "Your Majesty, I am already betrothed." The Emperor laughed loudly and mockingly. "I know." The Emperor picked up his wine glass and said with interest, "I was just joking, relax." But unexpectedly, the Emperor already understood the situation clearly and immediately thought, "Having my daughter appear here like this, it seems the rumors from the capital have reached here." The Lord of Thunberg turned to his daughter Helma and said, "Helma, bring out what I asked you to." The daughter obediently replied, "Yes, Father." The Emperor immediately thought that perhaps the position of Duchess Tiz would soon be vacant. The Emperor watched the girl leave, thinking, "This is an interesting rumor for anyone, but he, Decarno, doesn't want to find someone else." Then he looked at Decarno Tiz, who was eating calmly. The Emperor once again felt very interested in this matter and looked forward to some good drama on this trip. It's also quite interesting. He thought again, actually, Duke Tiz's recent actions have been somewhat unusual. Duke Tiz, known for being as sharp as a knife, actually planned to hold a wedding on this trip that was destined to be a loss. Although he was accompanying them, he didn't ask for any great benefits, and only took over the small landscaping project that Princess Bologna was in charge of, because the adjustment of conditions led to the princess's anger. But how did the princess come to earnestly plead with him? Where did this way of doing things come from? "If I receive help at a trivial cost, I should be grateful." Suddenly, His Majesty asked, "I wonder how Miss O'Hara has been these days. It's almost the weekend, and she can't go anywhere. What if Miss O'Hara gets bored?" Hearing this, Decarno Tiz was very surprised. "Is it almost the weekend already?" His Majesty calmly replied, "Today is Friday, so it's almost the weekend." Decarno Tiz immediately and hurriedly remembered what Eva had said. "Are you free next Friday? I have something I must do with you that day." He said urgently, "This trip is longer than I thought. If I leave early tomorrow morning, I could be back in the capital by the afternoon." Hearing this, His Majesty joked, "You already want to go back. Don't you think it's a pity? Is there something more urgent than completing state affairs that I don't know about? At this moment, the Lord's daughter returned. Miss Helma arrived at just the right time. She unexpectedly knelt. Your Majesty is noble. The Lord of Thunberg smiled fawningly and said, Thank you for your visit, Your Majesty. I have prepared a gift. She then opened the box. These are the first, or as we mine from the mine this time. His Majesty saw them and praised them greatly. I like them very much. These stones are not often seen in the capital. Then he noticed the stone and asked curiously, What is this? Only it emits a dim light. She explained, This is keylite, or is still an unprocessed rough stone, so its light is dim. She continued, Keylite, or has recently become very popular among young ladies because it is harder to find than ordinary diamonds. Decarno walked over and asked, If it's a rough stone, they don't know what's inside. Why is it so popular? She immediately explained, Because keylite, or carries a special meaning. Just like this, or whose inside cannot be seen through. You two may not know each other well yet, but if you spend a lifetime together, you could discover each other's true worth. People often give it as a gift when proposing. Decarno looked at the or carefully and smiled with interest. Then he turned to His Majesty and said, Your Majesty, I want to buy that, or His Majesty smiled and said, No need, I'll give it to you. But His Majesty proposed a condition. In exchange, stay here one more day. The rain is falling heavily. I'm afraid it won't stop for a while. At this moment, Eva smiled painfully with tears in her eyes, and she choked out, Thank you for coming. But that man was not Decarno. He said sadly, Eva, it's me. At this moment, Eva saw more clearly and called out Kalin's name. Eva asked softly, I didn't expect you to come all this way. She asked in surprise, How did you know I was here? Okay, I will translate the provided text file into English, maintaining the original structure and ensuring consistency with the character information you've given me. Kalin stammered in reply, Because you suddenly canceled our last appointment, I thought it was strange, so I sent someone to the ducal residence to see if anything had happened to you. But they said you went out today, so I ran to the merchant guild. He recounted, There I met Philip and heard you were here. Evangeline finally understood. So that was how it was. Evangeline felt extremely disappointed. He hadn't come after all, just as expected. My request was too much for him. Although her heart was heavy, she couldn't show it and could only smile at this old friend, the only guest who had come to visit her father. Evangeline forced a smile and said to Kalin, Thank you for coming. Father will be very happy. Yes, he certainly will be. Evangeline bit her lip tightly. Kalin gently touched her, worriedly saying, Evangeline, you don't look well, you're trembling. This won't do. Get into my carriage. Both of them got into the carriage to shelter from the rain. Evangeline gently wiped away the rainwater with her scarf. Kalin hurriedly asked, How long have you been standing in this rain? Kalin held his head, lamenting, This is Count O'Hara's funeral, but how could your fiancé leave you here all alone? Evangeline quickly said, I'm sorry to have worried you, Kalin. He hesitated. That's not what I meant. Kalin stammered, I was angry that he abandoned you like that. So I said that, I'm sorry. More importantly, you must see a doctor immediately. But Evangeline refused, saying, Kalin, I want to stay here a little longer. He looked at her, extremely worried and confused. Do you know what condition you're in right now? And you still say that. She struggled and whispered, Kalin. Evangeline still looked sadly at her father's grave. This is the last time. Kalin asked in surprise, What do you mean, Evangeline? She said nothing, merely lowered her head. At that moment, Evangeline made up her mind. Even if it's late, who knows? Perhaps he will come looking for me. I will wait for him one last time. Evangeline remembered her father's words when teaching her to identify good land. My father once waited at that spot for half a day. Isn't this very similar to waiting for someone? A carriage was also speeding through the rain. Decarno sat in the carriage thinking. Evangeline said Friday, but it's already evening. He was somewhat worried, but he gently touched the box beside him, consoling himself. Even so, I have prepared a gift. It will be fine. A beautiful, sparkling purple gemstone. Decarno held it in his hand, full of hope. He then recalled what that girl had said. Just like this stone that cannot be seen through from the inside, you two do not understand each other yet. But if you spend a lifetime together, you will be able to see each other's true worth. No young lady would dislike receiving such a gift, especially a proposal from a duke. He thought to himself, my marriage to Evangeline was decided secretly if I let her live in the annex. which is the Duchess's residence. Perhaps she wouldn't object to that decision either. Turning Evangeline into Evangeline Tiz is an obvious matter, so from the beginning, I didn't feel the need to propose to her. Even so, to obtain this stone, I accepted His Majesty's offer because I thought when she receives it, perhaps her expression will be different from usual. But Decarno Tiz was very worried because of what she had said before. He was very curious about what day it was today that made Evangeline look so urgent. Worrying about the past won't change anything. I have an agreement with His Majesty, and I have also prepared a gift that she will like. Decarno Tiz tried hard to console himself. Evangeline will surely understand. Suddenly, at this moment, many people gathered at the gate. Decarno Tiz got out of the carriage and asked, "What's wrong?" The steward immediately bowed and apologized. "I am very sorry, Your Grace." Decarno Tiz urgently commanded, "Steward, do I have to ask you again? Get straight to the point." The steward hesitated for a moment. "Miss O'Hara is missing." The steward immediately recounted the whole story. "The young lady went out in the morning, but hasn't returned, so we have been searching all the places she might have gone." Decarno Tiz listened. The servants standing by were all very frightened. No one knew where the one who was to become the lady of the house had gone, and everyone was panicking. Michael, who was behind, hurriedly said, "Your Grace, it's too late, isn't it? Shouldn't we prioritize finding the young lady? If this continues, what if rumors spread that she is missing then?" Decarno Tiz calmly said, "All right, I think I know where she is." Michael exclaimed in surprise, "Ah." Decarno Tiz turned his head and calmly stated an address. Trent 3rd Avenue. The rain fell harder and lightning lit up the sky. Horses galloped urgently in the rain. Decarno Tiz rode directly through the rain to find Evangeline. At this moment, he reined in his horse and looked ahead. This was a cemetery. Decarno Tiz pondered. This was a remote and inconspicuous place. Find that newly built grave, he thought. No need to look at the name on the tombstone. Some unengraved tombstones were scattered on the ground. A servant hurried over to report, "Your Grace, I found it." He held up a wooden tombstone and said, "This grave is just as you described. This marker is." Decarno Tiz reached out and gently took it. "It's Eva's father's tombstone." At that moment, Decarno Tiz seemed to have a sudden realization. "So this is why you came here today? To go to such lengths for an unmarked tombstone?" Suddenly, a voice came from behind. "No, I told you I didn't steal anything. Shut up. Do you know who this is?" A disheveled man with a scruffy beard was brought before him, bound. The man shouted, "I'm just a vagrant. What right do you have to treat me like this?" Decarno Tiz looked at him coldly. Michael continued to report, "Your Grace, this man boasted that he knows this road like the back of his hand. I thought you might need him, so I brought him for questioning." The man trembled and asked, What are you looking for?" Decarno Tiz said immediately, a woman unforgettable after a single glance. He ordered, "What's your impression of her? Tell me everything." At this time, in a magnificent mansion, a flustered and anxious voice called out, "Quick, go fetch the most skilled physician here." The steward stood outside the door, looking perplexed, but young Master Kalin immediately ordered, "No one is to speak of today's events." He gestured with his hand, "I trust you understand my meaning." "Yes." Kalin turned around and looked on with worry. At this moment, Evangeline lay in bed, unconscious. "Eva." Kalin leaned over her, wondering, how on earth had you been living these days? He reached out, gently stroking her hair, and said, "Don't worry." Suddenly, there was a sound, and Kalin jumped in surprise. He turned around in a daze, hastily put on his outer coat, and went out to check. "There seems to be some commotion outside. It's so late. Who's making such a racket?" Kalin stood at the door and said, "I'm sorry. The patient is resting. Please be quiet." The other party immediately replied coldly, "Who is resting?" Kalin was stunned. He looked up and saw Decarno Tiz standing there, furious, staring at him sharply. Kalin stammered, Duke Tiz." Decarno Tiz immediately questioned, "Who is resting?" Kalin still tried to stop him. "Duke Tiz, what are you doing here?" Outside the door, soldiers from both families were shoving each other. "What right do you have to treat our master like this? Even if you're a duke, you can't just barge in at this hour." Decarno Tiz thought, "You've been plotting something from the very beginning, haven't you?" Decarno Tiz coldly ordered, "I didn't come here to waste words with you. Where's Evangeline?" Kalin thought, he wasn't there when Eva needed him. and now he shows up. He immediately refused to answer, saying, "Your Grace, this is the property of the rebel family. Please mind your manners and make a formal visit." Decarno approached and said bluntly, "You're the one who should mind your manners." Kalin hesitated. What are you saying?" Decarno immediately said sarcastically to Kalin, "Didn't you just bring home someone who is betrothed? You should be grateful I haven't pursued the matter." Decarno then threatened, "If you don't let me see her, then get out of my way." Kalin had to respond to Decarno, "There's no use in me denying it. So I just want to ask one question. Eva nearly collapsed from being in the rain for too long. While I was calling for a physician, what were you doing?" Captain Kalin Rebel, Decarno said, making Kalin freeze, "Are you planning to interfere with your superior's work arrangements? If it's a matter concerning His Majesty, can you bear the responsibility?" Decarno said bluntly, "It seems you're the one who doesn't know your place. Your Grace, if you wish to deal with this according to military law, then please do so." Kalin struggled to restrain himself, clenching his trembling fists. Kalin had no choice but to bow and concede, "I will lead the way." Decarno looked towards the brightly lit room. He strode forward quickly, hurriedly pushed open the door, and Evangeline was sleeping soundly inside. Decarno immediately said, "Fortunately, this is the drawing room." Kalin hesitated for a moment. "Yes." Decarno coldly threatened Kalin, "If this were a bedroom, you'd be dead." The harbor was full of ships, and statues of various mythological creatures lined the streets. Addis was once one of the wealthiest cities in the eastern continent. Eva, when she was young, she was a very innocent and beautiful girl. Evangeline called out loudly, "Father." Evangeline waved her hand cheerfully, urging her father, "Come here quickly." Because of my father's work, Addis was a place I often visited, and I always considered it my hometown. Footsteps approached, and someone said, "Evangeline, you must be careful." He said to her very gently and lovingly, "Put on your hat properly. Your neck is all red from the sun." Recalling the time spent with her father, she was so happy. Whenever the sun was harsh, the air stuffy, and my cheeks flushed red from the heat, I always felt like I had just returned home after a long journey. "It's too hot." Just like then, Evangeline, burning with a high fever, lay unconscious in the room, constantly reliving the past. After a long time, she finally woke up. Evangeline looked around. Where is this? "This isn't my room." At that moment, Decarno was standing by the bed, asking her. Eva woke up unexpectedly. Startled, she sat up abruptly and asked him, "How did I end up in the Duke's bedroom?" Decarno soothed Eva. "Calm down, Evangeline, you can't sit up yet." He then instructed, "The attending physician said you are too exhausted." Decarno said, "He took meticulous care of her. The room in your building is too drafty. It's better for you to stay here for now." Eva said, somewhat shyly, "But we're not married yet. I can't stay in the Duke's bedroom." Decarno reassured her with a confident tone, "We will definitely have a wedding. You don't need to worry." Eva was stunned. "A wedding?" She then said, "Is that so?" Eva then thought silently for a moment, pondering, "My last memory is being with Kalin. Did he bring me back to the residence?" She then asked, "So, what about Kalin?" Decarno simply replied calmly, "If it's that naval captain, I know how to handle it. You just take care of yourself." Eva clutched the blanket, thinking, Decarno still did something to Kalin after all. Everything is proceeding as he wishes. He's the type of person who must have everything firmly in his grasp. Only then would he be satisfied. She looked at him, puzzled, just like imprisoning me in this bedroom. Eva only saw his coldness and indifference, a truth I realized while waiting for him in the rain. To him, the affairs of Duke are paramount. There's no place for me in it. But she remembered the moment she had mustered the courage to beg him. I just hoped that one time he would prioritize me. As the person I was to spend the rest of my life with, I had hoped he could, just once, play the role of a good husband. She had already endured successive hurts and could bear no more. At this moment, even though Eva was ill, she couldn't be submissive and obedient. She couldn't make him change his mind, not even an apology. Instead, he presumptuously imprisoned me. She decided to leave his room. "I'll get up first." But as soon as she stood up, she felt a little unsteady, and Eva immediately fell. Decarno was startled and immediately supported her. "Evangeline," he said to her anxiously, "what do you think you're doing standing up so suddenly? What if you fall? I told you to steady yourself first." She struggled, groaning lowly, "Let go." Decarno said in surprise, "What?" She said coldly, "I'm fine, let go." He stroked her hair and asked why. Are you uncomfortable with me? Eva hesitated for a moment. No. Decarno continued to press. Then what's the problem? She hesitated to speak. It's just, Eva said immediately, I think I've changed. Decarno quickly tied the belt of Eva's nightgown. She continued, in the same situation, but I have different feelings than before. So, maybe I'm the one who has changed. He just looked at her silently, then immediately replied, Is that so? Then change. Eva was very surprised. The Duke spoke, hurriedly embracing her, and said confidently, I can still handle this much. She leaned against his chest, silent and still. But then Eva pushed him away. I don't know if you can, but I don't think you will. Eva held Decarno's hand and said firmly, Now let's end it here. He glanced at her, then replied, Evangeline, you think. Eva thought sadly, I am not a suitable person for the Duke. Let's break off the engagement. Evangeline O'Hara looked sadly at Decarno and said, I don't think I'm a suitable person for the Duke. She decided to make her own choice, so his face was filled with an expression of disbelief. She announced, Let's break off our engagement. He clenched his fists, trying hard to suppress his anger. He asked again in a low voice, Is marriage so easy for you to give up? She looked up at him, tried to explain. At first, I also wanted to see our relationship through to the end. But her mind was a complete blank at this moment, and she replied, But now, I don't have the confidence anymore. He looked at her sadly, the image of this girl reflected in his eyes, and remained silent for a long time. He tilted his head, not looking at her, as if avoiding something, and replied, Let's just pretend I didn't hear those words. He turned around and quietly left. Eva's voice rang out, Duke. She said sadly, You know I'm serious, right? He turned his head to look at her in annoyance, but said nothing. She looked at him with a sorrowful tone and said, If you're willing to talk, you can come find me anytime. A new day began. Decarno was intently looking at official documents. Just then a voice sounded, Your Grace. Michael, holding a piece of paper, respectfully handed it to Decarno saying, I apologize for disturbing you during your busy schedule, but please be sure to look at this. He looked at the paper doubtfully. What is this? Michael replied respectfully, This is a newspaper I intercepted before its public release. Michael said the incident almost made the front page. He read the newspaper carefully. A certain young lady's secret outing. Last Friday night, a young lady of noble status visited a certain adjacent residence on Milk Street. According to an anonymous informant, this young lady is a well-known figure and may be intimately related to the homeowner. Decarno's voice sounded. Source. The image of the rebel family's steward flashed in his mind. Michael replied, There's speculation that the rebel family's steward sold the information. Decarno's thoughts continued. In my opinion, Captain Kalin had already dismissed that steward. It seems today, I thought the information leak problem was resolved. Holding the newspaper, he thought, too naive. He asked, How is the investigation progressing? Michael replied, Count Rebel, Captain Kalin's father, has been appointed Governor General of Atalantis for 20 years. Michael's voice continued. There are rumors that he is ambitious and wants to return to his central post, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Michael continued. Recently, he has been sending his eldest son, Anders, to establish connections with the Empire's nobility. He said with satisfaction, Well done. Send this news to Count Rebel. He sat in his chair, thinking about the Rebel family. Count Rebel, that father, must also know his second son is making a fool of himself here. If the Count doesn't want to live out his old age under the hot sun of Atalantis. He looked calmly at Michael and said he will manage his own affairs. Michael, sweating slightly with some concern, said, I understand. There is one more thing I wish to report to you. He said, the rebel family's steward said a lot over drinks. I don't know when news about the young lady will appear in the papers again. Michael began a plan. For now, I will go see the newspaper owners and remind them. But Decarno's voice interrupted him. No, he said with some impatience. Throw them a bigger bait. He dropped a bombshell. For example, my wedding. Michael panicked. Are you really going to have a wedding? He replied calmly. This marriage was decided long ago. It's just that too many things happened. That's why it was postponed. Michael wanted to continue, but your grace, Decarno interrupted him sternly. Enough. Don't you have things to attend to? Michael remembered the pink, then that raw stone you brought back from Thunberg. Should I wrap it as a gift? He lowered his head, as if hesitating about something, then answered angrily, throw it away. Michael was startled, his eyes wide. Yes, he said, narrowing his eyes in annoyance. I said throw it away, because it's useless now. With a hint of loss, he thought sadly, without that stone, it won't affect the already arranged wedding, and I will never see your, Eva's, smiling face again. Recalling Eva's gentle smile, he thought, I feel some regret. In Eva's room, the jewelry box was open. She stood before the mirror, looking at the dressing table. The engagement ring lay quietly in the table's drawer. She thought sadly, from now on, the position of Duchess no longer belongs to me. She gazed at the ring for a long time, feeling a sense of relief. Having accepted this fact, I feel much more comfortable than before. I think I've used this room for too long. She thought to herself, belongings that I can take with me. She closed the dressing table drawer, thinking, not as much as I imagined, but she also had things she was reluctant to part with. She thought, even so, the reason I can't easily leave this mansion. A dog barked in the distance. Woof woof. She laughed happily and called out loudly, Rex. In the distance, a fluffy, pure white dog ran over joyfully. Woof. It leaped high, with momentum, pouncing towards her, its mouth panting. She happily stroked the dog, her eyes full of affection, and said, My Rex, you're always so energetic. The puppy snuggled, rubbing its head into her palm. She said with a playful smile, Even if you're a dog, you must have style. Rex, you are a descendant of ancient northern dogs. The puppy lay on its back, exposing its soft belly. She lowered her head and continued speaking to the dog. Are you listening to me, Rex? You really are. She thought regretfully. If I leave here, I'll have to say goodbye to Rex. Her voice was sad as she said to the dog, Rex, you must live well, very bravely, you know. She hugged the dog and said, My child. Suddenly, she turned her head. Someone was approaching her. A voice full of contempt sounded. How touching, huh? If you have time, why don't you spend some of it with me? Decarno said coldly, We still have things to discuss. It was already afternoon. He stood there, watching her and Rex. She turned her head, stroking the dog's head. Rex, she said calmly, even if you didn't say so, I was waiting for you. He, Decarno blushed awkwardly, looking at her. You were waiting for me. She said, Of course. If you're ready, let's talk. She approached him and smelled the scent of alcohol wafting from him. She looked at his flushed face. Are you drunk? He covered his mouth and hiccuped lightly. She thought in surprise, what's wrong with this person? She even admired him a little. Remembering the day she drank with her father, I thought my alcohol tolerance was quite good, she recalled, but compared to Duke I was nothing. She looked at him, evaluating. He can actually stay sober to an annoying degree. I thought he drank strong liquor, but his cheeks are flushed and his steps are unsteady. She looked at him with concern. How much did you actually drink? He called her name, Evangeline. She felt uneasy, turned to leave, and said, Wait, I'll go call someone. You should rest first. We can talk later. He spoke to stop her wait. He asked hopefully about canceling the engagement. You were just saying that in anger, right? He looked at her gently and said, The reason I couldn't come that day was... She turned her head as if she understood everything and interrupted him in anger. So that's what you've thought all along. She said to him affirmatively, I was indeed angry and also disappointed. But the sky suddenly darkened and a heavy rain began to fall. Her voice rang out. That wasn't a hasty decision. The raindrops concealed her tears, her voice hoarse. That day, I stood alone before my father's grave and thought about many things. She stood crying in the drizzling rain and said, The same thing will happen again in the future. I cannot be the priority in your life. He looked at her sadly. I can't help it. I'm a Tiz, you know that. She shouted, That's not the only reason. She raised her hand to her chest and said affirmatively, We are no longer equals. She imagined their wedding, choked with emotion, and said, If I still stay here, a penniless woman entering the Tiz family. Thinking of the pointing fingers, the surrounding gossip, a penniless woman entering the Tiz family. I will be accused of being shameless, coveting this position, and always having to walk on eggshells around you. He sighed and scratched his head. All right, I understand what you mean. He quickly found a solution. I will immediately return the Loren territory and Bellport to you. I will also help you find the building in the district where your family's merchant guild used to be. She asked curiously, Why would you give me those things? He replied calmly, That way, no one could say you're living off me. He said, You will live as the Duchess of Tiz, honorably and ambitiously. She was silent for a long time. The dog ran to her side, but her thoughts drifted far away. If the problem was the difference in their circumstances, his solution was to return those circumstances. She wasn't quite satisfied. Too simple. He called her name somewhat worriedly. Evangeline. She thought, he's still as dense as ever. She shed tears of disappointment. My ambition is not the position of Duchess. He looked at her in surprise. What? She remembered him embracing her. He embraced me when I was at my most difficult, she thought. You will be by my side. She expressed to him frankly. That was my only wish. She said in disappointment. It's meaningless to say this now. But she turned away, no longer looking at him, as if she had truly let something go. She said, I'm packing my things at the NX building. I'll contact you through the steward when I'm done. He reached out to stop her. Wait, he asked nervously. Then what about our child? She looked at him in surprise and asked back, what did you say? His words hinted at something. During this time, we weren't just sleeping holding hands, were we? He remembered their passionate nights together and said, is it possible you're pregnant with my child? She said calmly, even if that were so, what difference would it make? She sighed. He seemed to have found an opening and said repeatedly, the child in your belly will secure your position. We don't need to argue anymore. She said calmly, Duke, even if I had a child. She said without hesitation, we would still end. He continued to plead with her. Wait, Evangeline. He asked stubbornly, whose idea was it to cancel the engagement? Suddenly, the dog approached him. She raised her hand to stop it. Rex. Rex lunged forward, baring his fangs. She hurriedly hugged him and soothed. Sure, I'm all right, Rex. He scratched his head in annoyance and said, in a week, the O'Hara family's debt will be settled at the Labyrinth auction. By then, I believe you will have calmed down and will reconsider this marriage carefully. She looked up at him in surprise because he was so stubborn. She said resolutely, no, my answer will not change, no matter when. In the room, a maid said respectfully, Duchess, shall I prepare a meal for you? If you don't like it, I can change it to something else. Please just let me know. Her voice sounded, then prepare a meal for me. The usual will be fine. The maid replied, I understand, Duchess. She looked at the maid and gave a bright smile. Duchess, she thought uneasily, it seems Decarno wants to formalize this marriage at all costs. At all costs. She thought in anguish, but I don't want to. She opened a drawer of the cabinet. Is there any way? Holding a carefully wrapped book, she thought worriedly. Can this make me give up on Decarno right now? She looked at the book in her hand. The perfect way to end our engagement. 1 week later, in the morning, Philin pointed to the map and said to Decarno, this area is where the O'Hara Company's ship sank. I've already investigated all the nearby coasts, but there wasn't much to find. I don't think there's any point in searching further. He said nothing, gazing into the distance. Philin's voice rang out, drawing his attention. Hey, are you listening to me? He looked at Philin. What am I doing? He shouted angrily. What is this? He said, still angry, the day the news of Count O'Hara's disappearance spread. I followed your instructions and searched for the Count's whereabouts all day, but you didn't even bother to listen to the report. What are you thinking? He said worriedly, some say the body can't be found. But he interrupted him, seemingly sensing something. He said calmly, don't you find this interesting? Philin was stunned, looking at him in surprise and asking, interesting? What's interesting? Decarno remembered the mud-stained shoe and said, the body can't be found, yet personal belongings were delivered to Evangeline, and they were hard to find items at that. Philin also thought so. That's right. A drowned body swells in water, and shoes or clothes don't easily come off, yet such an item was found. How ironic. He thought with a headache, I've searched all the places where there were said to be traces, but still found nothing. How am I supposed to find the O'Hara Company? Decarno pointed to a place on the map. We must search the black markets in the nearby sea areas. He said, the company mainly deals in valuables. Items drifted from the shipwreck would surely be transferred to the night markets, along with related information. This time, you go search that place too. Philin said dejectedly, you should have said so earlier. I worked hard for so long for nothing. Decarno comforted him. I know you've worked hard. Thank you for your efforts. Philin replied wearily. Anyway, our beautiful future Duchess will surely be very disappointed. Decarno said, wouldn't she be expecting news of her father? After all, he's her only family. Decarno remained silent, worried. Philin's voice sounded. I was planning to greet the young lady properly after returning, but at this rate, I won't have the face to see her again. As Philin was sighing, he heard Decarno's voice. After leaving the port, when can we meet? See you at the wedding. Philin sat up in surprise, astonished. Right, the wedding. What? What's going on? He asked unexpectedly. When exactly? Decarno replied calmly soon. Philin asked worriedly. Would Miss O'Hara agree to a wedding under these circumstances? Decarno said. The steward reported that Evangeline seems to have returned to her former self. He also said she's eating well, is comfortable, and has everyone attend to her in the bathroom. She must have realized that what I said was a practical solution. Decarno thought, somewhat uncomfortably, why do I feel so dejected? Philin, still worried, asked, are you all right? Decarno stood up wearily and replied, what's not all right? I'm fine. Let's end our conversation here. I'm getting up now. Philin felt it wasn't enough. What? Is our conversation ending just like this? Decarno asked back in surprise. What else is there to say? Decarno, I have other arrangements. Philin's voice sounded, no, aren't you going to tell me the location and date of the wedding? Decarno put on his coat and said calmly, I'll tell you that later. Philin's thoughts drifted. He's leaving so soon. Does he have some arrangement? How could it be? Philin realized with surprise the Raburn auction. He said, I heard Raburn is quite lively today. Are there any good items? Decarno was silent for a long time. Suddenly, a shout was heard. Your Grace. Michael, panting, said urgently, you need to go to Raburn immediately. Decarno looked at him, a hint of worry on his face. A magnificent and luxurious palace, Le Baron, Rocks, the largest auction held 4 times a year by Rocks. Countless precious items are auctioned here. The scale of the auction is enormous. For example, mansions, real estate, bills of exchange, or disposed items. The area below the stage was filled with waiting people. Therefore, the main clients of the auction are usually important figures. But today, most of them here were creditors of the O'Hara family. Many whispered discussions arose. As long as Duke Tiz sells the Roca Plains and the vineyard, we'll get our money, right? Probably. It's no exception, even in the private rooms. What if he can't auction it off? That land is so large. The big shots at this auction won't let this land go. You don't have to worry about that. A girl walked onto the stage and said solemnly, I will be hosting today's final auction. Excuse me. Eva appeared. She walked forward and asked in surprise, I heard an auction is taking place here. The girl said unexpectedly, Miss O'Hara. The girl looked at Eva and replied politely, I'm very sorry. I didn't expect you would be willing to be in a place like this. The girl's voice sounded, however, if you still wish to stay, I will guide you to the seat reserved for Duke Tiz. Eva interrupted her, no, I'm here to auction an item. Eva asked, can you give me some time? The girl hesitated in surprise. The girl quickly regained her composure and said politely, Miss O'Hara, I don't know what item you wish to auction, but here at Raburn, we do not handle precious items from young ladies. The girl said gently, if it's that kind of item you wish to auction, I can introduce you to another auction house. Right now, I must introduce the Roca Plains that the Duke is auctioning. She still said resolutely, I came because I want to auction something else. The girl broke out in a cold sweat, lamenting inwardly, then said, I'm very sorry, but we have already announced to the customers that we will be auctioning the Roca Plains. If you wish to make a change, you must provide something of greater value than the Roca Plains. Eva hesitated slightly, clutching the paper in her hand. Then she lowered her hand as if giving up on something and said, I believe this is valuable enough. The girl took the paper with some unease, wondering what this old piece of paper could be. The girl unfolded the paper and began to read. The girl was flustered and stammered, Mississippi this. This is. She recalled the beautiful sea and said, the title deed for the Macau Sea includes not only the white sandy beaches, but also the coastal islands. The girl realized with horror that she had stumbled upon an astounding secret, a place whose ownership had been unknown for many years. This largest coastline in the south was almost entirely undeveloped land. The girl looked at Eva in shock, thinking, it's Miss O'Hara. Eva said loudly, I heard that those interested in the hotel or resort business all said they wanted the Roca Plains. She continued, the Macau Sea is no less valuable than the Roca Plains, and I believe it would be very suitable for the resort business. What do you think? The girl nodded like a chick pecking a grain. Yes, it's truly more than enough. Nothing more is needed. May I ask how you obtained this document? She was speaking, but suddenly stopped. That incident. She remembered her beloved father. He had given her a box. Evangeline, this is your share. She looked at her father in surprise and asked, what is this, father? He said lovingly, one cannot predict what will happen. This is my secret gift to you. Keep it well, and open it only when you encounter an unbearable situation. She looked at the box in her hands. A gift from father 2 years ago when I entered the Duke's household. She reached out and untied the string on the box. Father said to open it when I have nowhere else to turn. Perhaps my inheritance is inside. Even she was very surprised when she saw it. She said sadly, my father's legacy. She thought that's fine too. If the auctioned item can be replaced, I'll hand over the title deed to this sea. She took back the document with some dissatisfaction and said, if you find this too difficult, I will try another auction house. The girl said hurriedly, Miss, please wait a moment. Eva stopped and said, I'll give you 3 seconds to decide. Eva stood there imposingly and said, what are you going to do? The girl slammed down the gavel forcefully. I declare that the Macau Sea title registration documents will be auctioned for the stated amount. The girl's voice rang out. The winning bidder, please follow the staff's instructions. Everyone said happily, excellent. I was worried when I heard the Roca planes were going to be replaced by another item. Someone said with surprise, I never expected Miss O'Hara to auction such a valuable item. Philin said with some concern, Mississippi. She replied, we'll talk later. She answered calmly, I'll tell you when everything is over. A bald man approached the two. He held a suitcase full of money in his hand and stammered, Mississippi. I apologize for the mistakes I've made in the past. Philin was angry, his face flushed, and he was flustered. These people, who were previously threatening and clamoring in front of the annex, were now feigning friendliness after receiving money. Eva replied calmly, thank you for coming to me first like this. I also have something I'd like to say to everyone. Her voice carried a note of sadness as she said, although it was not intentional, it is a fact that my family has caused everyone great harm. They covered their faces and wept quietly. She placed her hand on her chest and bowed, saying, on this occasion, I would like to apologize to everyone on behalf of my late father. The crowd hurriedly tried to stop her. No, miss, don't do that. Yes, you're to become the Duchess of the Tiz family. How could you? She continued, I have had many shortcomings from the beginning, so it is only natural to apologize to everyone. And, in the silence of the crowd, her clear voice rang out, I have had many shortcomings from the beginning, so it is only natural to apologize to everyone. And she forced a smile. I have had many shortcomings from the beginning, so it is only natural to apologize to everyone. And, she said, I wish you all a peaceful evening. A voice called out, Miss, I've been waiting for you for a long time. The girl bowed and handed Eva a piece of paper. This is a copy of the sales contract for the Macau CU auctioned. She said calmly, you've worked hard. The girl said happily, then I'll take my leave. If you have any good items, please feel free to find me. Eva read it carefully. Philin looked at Eva with distress, unable to bear it, and said, Miss, by selling this, you've paid off all your debts. It would be one thing if they were relatives, but you don't have to bow your head to those. Investors, Eva said calmly, Philin, during this time, I received money from my father and lived a life enviable to anyone. She recalled her younger days and said, for those who helped me enjoy that life, I naturally have to respect them. He seemed relieved and said, anyway, it's truly fortunate that everything was resolved smoothly. However, he looked at her unexpectedly and said, but I didn't expect you to actually own the Macau Sea. She laughed heartily. Actually, I didn't know either. It was something my father gave me, and I've kept it for several years. She subconsciously thought of the box, then said, he told me to open it when I encounter a crisis, so I opened it recently to take a look. She nervously clenched her sleeves. I'm glad it protected my father's honor. Now I really hope to rest peacefully. After a moment, she exclaimed happily, startling him. In any case, it's all over. She put on her cloak, not forgetting to remind him, Philin, don't forget what I asked you to do. He stammered, yes. Remembering the auction, she said happily, if possible, I hope to see it in the newspaper tomorrow morning. Philin panicked, trembling all over, and stammered, Mississippi. She called him, somewhat surprised, Philin. What's wrong? A voice rang out, Evangeline. She flinched worriedly and turned around. He was covered in sweat, his face somewhat red. He must have rushed here. She was startled, thinking Decarno. He said angrily, I heard you replaced the auction item. He looked suspiciously at her smiling face and said, what exactly did you gain by going this far? She said calmly, I gained myself. Now there's no father, no family, only myself left. She thought of those noble young ladies. I can endure anyone insulting me because insults from strangers That'd have no effect on me at all. She thought of him again, but to be treated like this by someone I once thought understood me very well. She fell silent for a long time, thinking sadly, my will to endure has vanished. This will be the last time I see this man, so it's okay to speak my true feelings. She said, actually, I really enjoyed the time I spent with the Duke. He looked at her with a hint of expectation. Perhaps there was still a chance. He called her name, Evangeline. She began to speak. Before, I only knew how to wander, but when I found a place to live, I felt proud, finally having a place I could call home. Her voice carried a hint of sadness as she continued. Before I met the Duke, I knew nothing of this world, so I dreamed of a fairy tale house. He said, somewhat confused, but I am a problem. She said affirmatively, no, that's also part of it. He flinched, looked up, and asked very surprised what. She closed her eyes, somewhat nervous, and gently stroked her hair. She confessed softly, I once really liked you. He called her name in confusion, Evangeline. She turned away nonchalantly. I've said everything I wanted to say. I'm leaving now. Thank you for everything. At that moment, he grabbed her hand. Wait a minute, are you just going to leave like this? She smiled calmly and said, yes. Because to annul the engagement, I have honorably paid off the debt. The Duke wants a convenient duchess, but I don't want to live like that, so we can no longer be together. She shook off his hand, took a step back, and said, from now on, let's remember each other through news reports. He shouted after her, Evangeline, wait. It was as if a wall stood between them. He stood there silently, watching her leave. She said gently, may you be well. He stood there alone, as if he had lost something extremely important. Decarno could do nothing but watch Evangeline's figure disappear. Looking at the girl's small, retreating back, seeing the morning papers extra, everyone was very surprised. Extra, Duke Tiz and Miss O'Hara. Miss O'Hara at the Naval Command residence. Philin looked at the newspaper in his hand in surprise, his teacup frozen midair, and said, what's this? Such a chaotic situation. He even acted as if he was going to force the marriage. He looked at the newspaper in disbelief. Breaking news. Duke Tiz cancels engagement with Miss O'Hara. They actually broke up. 3 days after the engagement was called off. At the Naval Club, a man was bowing his head, pouring a drink into a glass. A gunshot rang out, and a bullet pierced the head of a mannequin. Decarno looked at the gun in his hand and said with satisfaction, this is a new model. It feels very solid. Philin, holding a wine glass, praised happily. Indeed, Duke Tiz's level is different. Because he likes it, he even established a club specifically for the Navy. Decarno turned his head to look at him, wondering why Philin was so quiet. He asked with a cigarette in his mouth, what's wrong? Philin froze and said nothing. He looked at Decarno, thinking, seriously, he's been in low spirits since that day. He remembered what happened 3 days ago. What happened between him and Eva had become public. The engagement between Duke Tiz and Miss O'Hara, once praised by everyone as perfect, was now broken. Her voice seemed to echo in his ears. I was the one who proposed to annul the engagement. I've decided to support each other's future without any regrets. Moreover, it was obvious to the Tiz family that Miss O'Hara's interview was published in the newspaper. Although the content was cliché and dull, it was enough to prevent the never-shaken Tiz ducal family from being embroiled in a scandal. Philin's voice interrupted his thoughts. He comforted him enthusiastically. It's probably because it's your first time experiencing something like this that you feel confused. Come on, you try too. You know the technique for aiming at a target, right? Imagine the target is the face of someone you hate. He said coldly, I don't need to. You can play more. Philin said, don't say that. Just then, 3 people walked in from a distance, and one of them asked, have you two heard today's news? Kalin, Decarno, and Philin focused their attention on them. One of them said, met a woman at a hotel. The 3 of them discussed animatedly. I didn't see clearly, but I heard she's a stunning beauty with platinum blonde hair. Some even said he looked eager, as if he was about to propose. Does he have a girlfriend? A gunshot rang out, startling the 2 men who jumped, their faces pale. A wisp of white smoke rose from the gun in Decarno's hand. A hole was pierced through the neck of a nearby mannequin. Philin looked at him in panic and shouted, Decarno. Decarno responded, Philin. Just as you said, he raised the gun, his finger on the trigger, and said seriously, this gun is good. In a luxurious hotel. Locke's hotel. The door opened, and Killian showed a surprised expression. Eva was also very surprised to see Killian. He said, Eva. She smiled and raised her hand in greeting. Killian, long time no see. He smiled, his eyes narrowing to slits. I finally get to see you like this, Eva. She said, yes. I was worried I wouldn't be able to see you then. Thank you for coming. Behind Eva, a few young ladies happened to pass by. Isn't that Miss O'Hara over there? I heard she canceled her engagement a few days ago. She's probably already looking for a new future husband. Eva blushed with embarrassment. Kalin, glanced at those people. They continued. It's not like they were officially married. What's the big deal? He comforted, Eva, don't pay attention to their words. She replied calmly as if nothing was wrong. I'm fine. People will continue to pay attention for a while. I expected that. She gave a self-deprecating smile. Even though I refused the best marriage proposal in the empire, the position of Duchess 'tis, I'm still seen as someone desperate to get married. How ridiculous, she thought dejectedly. I'm tired of expecting others to share responsibility now. He looked at her and reminded, Eva, sorry, please drink your tea before it gets cold. He said, I ordered what you like. She replied, thank you. He blushed, looked at her, and said, when I was on the warship, I didn't even have time for a cup of tea. Being able to see you again and drink tea together like this feels like a dream. She smiled and said, speaking of which, wasn't becoming a naval officer your long-held dream? How does it feel? He answered vaguely, I don't know. It's completely different from what I imagined. He remembered his training days on the ship, where every day was arduous on the swaying vessel. He happily told her about his experiences on board. Physical training, shooting practice, no rest if you don't hit the target. During those exhausting days, I would recall the taste of this tea. She said, do you remember? This tea is the same kind that Duchess Chara grew in her tea garden in Addis. They both recall their childhood. We used to rush to pick tea leaves, and you even got injured and fell. When the Duchess found out, she had a huge garden built next to Father's. But we can no longer drink the tea we had back then. He said, but you were very happy seeing all sorts of different flowers. He blushed, looked at her gently, and said, I was really happy back then. I missed you so much, Eva. She looked at her reflection in the teacup and said, Kalin. He interrupted her. Actually, I'm thinking of leaving the Navy. She asked in surprise, you're leaving the Navy? He said, it doesn't quite suit me. He picked up a sugar cube from the plate and said, then what do you plan to do? I don't know. I'll think about it later. I've already told my father and older brother that I'm going to retire. He dropped the sugar cube into his teacup and said with some anticipation, you only live once, so I want to live without regrets. She was a little flustered by his words. Eva, I want our relationship to go back to how it was before. They both remembered scenes from the past. Kalin said, back then you and I, we were so happy. He gently stirred his teacup and said, if it were me, I would have been by your side during your difficult times. I would have protected you and kept you from harm. He confessed to her with a tense expression, now that you've broken off your engagement, I have to say it. Eva, I want to marry you. Eva sighed silently. He finally said it, she thought wearily. He said anxiously, you don't know how long I've waited for this moment. I'm confident I can do a good job. But Eva didn't think so. She felt dissatisfied. Now everyone knows I'm being blamed for breaking off the engagement, and you want to marry me, so you don't have regrets. But what about me? She said seriously, like the calm before a storm, have you ever tried to think from my perspective? Kalin, she said, her eyes wide with anger, we can never go back to that time. Kalin was stunned. She continued, I plan to leave Locks. I came today to say goodbye to you one last time. I hope you can live the life you want. She warned him sternly, when we meet next time, I hope we can talk properly, because now is not the past. He said sincerely, but Eva, I'm serious. Kalin was stunned by her words. Kalin, you don't love me. The two were silent for a long time. She picked up her suitcase, stood up, and said, it's my treat today. Be careful on your way. He said disappointedly, you were engaged to Duke Tiz. Can't you give me that kind of chance? He looked up and questioned her, what's the difference between that man and me? She reached out and touched his shoulder. She said sadly, let's end our conversation here. He raised his hand to take hers, but he was a step too late. She withdrew her hand and said, thank you for coming to see me that night, Captain. He was silent for a long time, then said, live well. She gently brushed aside her hair that had been tousled by the wind. She thought sadly, I've lost my family, honor, and friends. She remembered what Decarno had once said, go pursue the life you desire. And what about you, Evangeline? Looking up at the sunny blue sky, Decarno's voice echoed in her ears. Is this really the life you desire? She froze, an expression of disbelief on her face, thinking, no, how could it be? I've given up everything. Her thoughts drifted, but I've never been satisfied with the status quo. Right now, if I have to do everything alone, she thought firmly, I will leave the place where he is. Decarno's image flashed in her mind. She thought, and then started a new life. Light shone upon the kingdom. Everything was on track, ready to welcome the arrival of a new day. After leaving Duke Decarno, Eva felt a little lost and indescribable, but everything would soon be forgotten, like a sudden and quickly dissipating sun shower. She was convinced of this. I gave up the identity of a member of the ducal family that I thought was a matter of course, and I don't regret it. On the contrary, I feel very relieved. She remembered her father, who had always been by her side when she was young. Now, I will plan my own path forward, just like my father once did. Eva walked forward, still with a hint of loss in her heart. If there was any regret, it was losing Kalin, the person I once thought would be my lifelong best friend. One of the reasons I left him was because Kalin had developed feelings for me. This matter started a few hours ago. At the Locks Hotel, a blonde man approached her and greeted, "Long time no see, Evangeline." Eva was somewhat surprised by this person's appearance. "Brother," this person had a cold and inscrutable expression. "He heard that you were at the hotel after breaking off the engagement. It seems to be true." And this person was Anders, Kalin's older brother. Eva quickly composed herself and hurriedly said to him, "Please come in first. I have an appointment with Kalin later." But Anders suddenly reacted somewhat exaggeratedly. He eagerly stopped Eva. "No, it's not necessary. Listen carefully, Evangeline." He stood in front of Eva, looking down at her, then said in a gentle tone, "Kalin said he's leaving the army and also said he's going to marry you soon." My father fainted after hearing this news. After that, Anders paused for a moment, then emphasized something, while his tone carried a hint of sad emphasis. "Evangeline, if you marry Kalin, our family will be ruined." The more he spoke, the more his sad tone turned into a threat. He looked at Eva with dissatisfied eyes. "You're a smart person. You must understand what I mean. Don't give Kalin false hope." Eva completely couldn't accept what Anders had just said. She really couldn't believe that getting close to her now would hurt others. The more she recalled that incident, the tighter her grip on the suitcase became. Although she understood Anders' words, those words were enough to leave scars in my heart. She looked around, looking at the quiet houses, at the bustling city with people coming and going, but in this capital city, there was no longer a place for me. Just then, a voice came, "Miss." It turned out that the person calling her was Philip. He waved for her to come over. Eva walked toward him happily, smiling back at him and saying, "The carriage was called just in time. Thank you, Philip." Philip gave a faint smile and replied, "Observing propriety, of course, this is my duty. However, miss, you're leaving already, when you've just had a rare chance to rest." As Philip helped her into the carriage, Eva held his hand and replied with a smile, "Why not rest a little longer? I'd like to, but staying in one place doesn't suit me." After helping Eva into the carriage, Philip also intended to step up into the carriage. But suddenly, Eva closed the carriage door from the inside, implying she didn't want him to follow. Philip was completely surprised by this and exclaimed in shock. "Mississippi," Eva looked down at him from the carriage window and then smiled gently. "Surprising, isn't it, Philip?" She took a black box out of her pocket and then tried to hand it to Philip. "Please take this first. It's a gift for you, though it's nothing special." Philip didn't dare to delay, reached out to take it, and opened the box to find countless jewels inside. Eva's jewelry. "Miss, isn't this the money left over after paying off the debts?" "These are your jewels, Mississippi. Why are you giving them to me?" Eva lowered her eyelids. Clearly, she was reluctant to leave him behind. But life is not a math problem with a standard answer. There will always be changes. Nor is it a straight line. There will always be unexpected turns. This was all she could do. Eva's voice sounded softly. "Because you've always been by my side, thank you so much." Philip was speechless. Hearing these words of farewell, he must have been choked with emotion. "No, this is naturally my duty." Philip looked up at Eva, knowing this might be the last time he saw the person he had followed for many years. "I will continue to serve you in the future, Mississippi. Please open the door for me." Eva smiled, an expression of helplessness. "Unfortunately, I can't afford to hire anyone at the moment." She also thought of Karen, the person she once thought would be her friend forever. Fleeting love and admiration cannot last. Even people who have known each other for many years cannot walk the same path if their thoughts differ. Philip still hadn't given up and pleaded to follow, but Eva looked at him. "If you don't like it, how about this?" Her eyes shone with a determined light, clearly wanting to gain his trust. "I will definitely succeed and bring Philip back under the best conditions." She also didn't forget to remind this person she regarded as an elder, her voice filled with suppressed sobs. Until then, you must take good care of yourself. Finally, the carriage gradually moved away, its shadow becoming increasingly blurry. Philip still stood there, as if he would never leave. I will wait for you forever, Mississippi. The coachman turned his head and asked Eva, Miss, where are you going? Take me there. Eva looked absently at the letter in her hand. She seemed to be looking at it very carefully, but didn't open it. After a while, she put the letter down and then said, Take me there. Before long, the sky had turned to dusk. Soft, orange sunlight sprinkled on every road, on the red-tiled roofs, and wisps of white smoke rose from the chimneys. The green trees were also illuminated, shining with a brilliant gold. Eva stepped out of the carriage. She reached up to tidy her hair and clothes, and couldn't help muttering to herself, sitting in a carriage for half a day is really tiring. She looked up at the window of a house, and then said to herself, Is this the place? She took out the letter in her hand again. Unconsciously, her expression softened, and her eyes filled with sorrow, bringing her thoughts back to distant memories. Nanny, the address on Nanny's letter. Meyer District, 15, Lysel Street, room 30. To my lovely and missed miss. Eva, she remembered when she was little, lying in her nanny's arms, being held and caressed by her. Because she traveled around various countries with her father, whenever she became close to someone, the servants' attitudes would change. Nanny was the only one who had protected her for 10 years. She remembered asking Nanny when she was very young, Are you really going to Mayor? At that time, Nanny's voice, perhaps tinged with reluctance, or perhaps with nostalgia, gently said while stroking her, It seems the master has already told you. She stroked Eva's head, confiding gently, I had wanted to take care of you, miss, until your debut into society. At that time, Eva was still ignorant, just a child, and simply voiced her thoughts. Then you can stay until then. Why do you have to leave now? She remembered Nanny saying then, My daughter who lived in Mayor has passed away, leaving only a grandchild. To you, miss, the Count is your only relative, and that child is my only relative. She hugged Eva tightly, lifted her up, and kissed her cheek. My lovely miss, I will definitely write. Don't be too sad. Afterwards, Eva hugged her back, burying her head in her nanny's neck and nuzzling, as if she wouldn't be able to be with this person for a long time after that. She only remembered that at that time, Nanny said with tears, We will meet again, leaving old memories behind. Eva walked towards the door of the house, her heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and a flood of thoughts. Nanny probably only remembers me as a child, which is so worrying. I wonder if visiting her looking like this now will be too awful. The letter said she could come any time, but what if she's disappointed by my changed appearance? Suddenly, a weary male voice came from behind. Hey, are you going in or out? The sudden voice startled Eva. Oh my goodness. Who is it? The young man said sternly as he approached. I thought it was a thief. But as soon as he finished speaking, he stopped to look Eva up and down. With your timidity, you probably aren't a thief either. Eva might have been through a lot, but she was sure that no one had ever dared to speak to her like that in her entire life. A thief. How rude. The two glared at each other unhappily, like opposing factions, as if a bomb had exploded between them. In the end, it was Eva who broke the tense atmosphere first. First of all, I apologize for disturbing you so late. The young man smiled. Thank you for admitting it. A moment later, he spoke again. You are a young miss, right? Eva hesitated for a moment. Yes. The young man scratched his head and explained, My grandmother talks about you all the time, the famous young miss. Then, he complained a bit more. Her hair and eye color. I've probably heard it 1,000 times. If I can't remember that, I must be a fool. Red is a rare eye color in the Empire. After saying all this, he extended his hand, signaling he wanted to get acquainted, and then introduced himself first. I'm Keith. I'm Nanny's grandson. On the other side, Eva looked at Keith's hand hanging in midair, somewhat hesitant and unsure what to do. Finally, out of politeness, she extended her hand. But just as she was about to shake hands and greet him, Keith suddenly withdrew his hand. Then he said again in his light-hearted tone, It's not right to greet a noble lady like this. It was my mistake because I don't know any better. Eva quickly realized that this person was teasing her. Her gaze scrutinized him for a moment. This person doesn't seem to welcome me. She was somewhat displeased, but didn't say it outright. It's the first time we've met today. On the other side, Keith called out to Eva a few times. Hey, young miss, if you're here to see my grandmother, I wouldn't recommend it. Eva seemed convinced this person disliked her. Why? I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to know how my nanny is doing. Keith raised his hand, signaling her to stop talking. I know. I'm saying this for your own good, Mississippi. Finally, he uttered a sentence that cut Eva's heart like a knife. My grandmother, she doesn't remember anything. So, perhaps she has already forgotten her memories of you, Mississippi. I don't recommend you go see her, because my grandmother doesn't remember anything. Afterwards, the two of them went inside. Nanny came out, a smile on her lips. Oh my, has my young miss come to see me? Eva looked at her face, now etched with many wrinkles, and couldn't help but feel a pang in her heart. Nanny took her hand and said with a smile, I never thought I'd see the young miss grown up with my own eyes. Since I came to Meyer, the master often sent people with portraits of the young miss. Look here, the walls are covered with portraits of the young miss from childhood to now. Nanny said nostalgically. Every time I saw the young miss growing up bit by bit, I felt incredibly proud that I had taken care of you in your youth. Her voice became more emotional, filled with regret. Not long ago, the master invited me to the engagement ceremony, but I wasn't feeling well and couldn't go. I've always felt very sorry towards the young miss. Eva quickly clasped her hand tighter and replied softly, It's all right, Nanny. Aren't we seeing each other again now? Nanny's voice remained steady. Now my young miss has truly become a duchess. She completely failed to notice that Eva's smile had faded. The mistress of the Tis ducal house. Yes, that's my young miss. There's nothing she can't do. Finally, Eva let out an almost inaudible sigh. She hugged Nanny tightly, just like when she was a child, completely nestled in her embrace. Only now she had grown much taller, no longer a small figure, and Nanny could no longer fully embrace her. She buried her made-up face and said slowly, Nanny is right. I could do anything, right? Nanny was so happy that her arms around her tightened a little more. My young miss is truly. Just then, Nanny suddenly said something that made her realize how cruel reality was. But you look like an adult now. When did you grow up so much? Eva released her, her eyes showing obvious confusion. Nanny continued, Today, during the day, it seems you went to the port with the master, didn't you? Look, your dress is all wrinkled. Nanny spoke, her voice both sad and nostalgic. Miss used to sneak off to the port all the time, always pretending she didn't. In the end, only Nanny's voice echoed in the space, lightly brushing Eva's ear like a feather. But this Nanny of yours, I know everything. Yes, you can't hide anything from Nanny. Time passed, and evening soon arrived. As soon as she entered, Keith asked her, So, did you confess to Nanny? She actually wanted to ask him something about Nanny. Keith, knowing what she wanted to ask, quickly replied, Nanny has had memory loss for several years, but she has moments of clarity. Was she lucid when she saw you? Eva just hummed softly. Then, Keith brought her a chair and asked her to sit. As soon as Eva sat down, she asked him, Has it been difficult for you since Nanny got sick? Keith just shook his head. No, I just hope she can live happily in her own way. That's good enough. I think she was especially happy today. After that, he looked at Eva and then slowly said, More importantly, I apologize for before. Eva was a little amused to this situation. Why? Keith explained, I asked you, miss, to be careful with your words earlier. He earnestly, bit by bit, carefully instructed Eva, Nanny doesn't know that the Duke has disappeared and that you, miss, have broken off the engagement. You absolutely must not mention those things. Seeing that this wasn't enough, he added, It's not that I'm afraid you'll hurt Nanny. He brought up the past again. When she was living with me, she was always so happy when she saw you in the paintings. She always talked about you, miss. Keith's voice was filled with concern for his grandmother. But if I let her know that the Duke met with an accident, or that you, miss, broke off the engagement, even without those things, I'm afraid her condition will worsen. Eva naturally understood this, and quickly nodded in agreement. Yes, I understand. Because I didn't come here to make her worry. Keith spoke again, this time changing the subject. He seemed to really like switching topics quickly, but, miss, are you eating properly? While drinking water, he looked at her scrutinizingly. If you faint, my Nanny will be in a panic because she adores you so much. So please take care of yourself, miss. These words came from his heart, and Eva felt it too, so she quickly said, Thank you for your concern. She felt comforted that someone still cared about her. Keith wanted to say something else. The thing is But Eva probably understood Keith's hesitation, so she took a step forward and said, First, I'm sorry if I startled you. I've been through a lot, so I'm more sensitive than before. She slowly said to Keith, Staying longer will cause trouble for everyone. I must leave. Keith hadn't processed her words yet. Leave. A bit sudden, Eva said while standing up and packing her luggage. She really wanted to leave now. Yes, I originally came to see my Nanny. When I saw her again, I had some things I wanted to say, but it seems the situation doesn't allow for it now. Finally, Before leaving, she still said to him, "I'm sorry for coming without notifying you." But Keith seemed to have just reacted, and he opened his mouth to try and keep her no wait. He poured out all his feelings. "If you leave like this, Miss, Nanny will scold me. Please stay here for a few days until you find a place to live." Eva was a bit flustered. She hadn't actually thought that far ahead. "No, I didn't mean that." Keith reached out and took her luggage, absolutely refusing to let go. It seemed he wanted to force her to stay. "Just for a few days. There's an empty room in the house, so it's okay." He carried the suitcase upstairs, informing her on the way, "I'll prepare a room on the second floor." All his actions were very decisive, and he also told Eva to rest assured, "I won't go up to the second floor tomorrow, so you can use it freely." Eva was a little flustered, but quickly accepted his kindness. She smiled gently, "Thank you." At this moment, the scene changed to another place. The butler of the Tiz family was placing letters on the table. He heard someone enter and turned around. Seeing that the person was Decarno, he quickly greeted him, "Your Excellency." He raised his hand in accordance with etiquette and then said, "I was waiting for you. There are quite a few matters that require your opinion for a reply." On the table were the letters he had just brought. These are invitations to banquets. It is now the main social season for the upper class. These invitations are from families with whom we've maintained ties for generations, so it's difficult for me to refuse them. Decarno's face showed no joy. It could even be described as gloomy. He felt a bit of headache. "I've just broken off my engagement, and the invitations are already flooding in. They don't even bother to hide their intentions." Decarno thought about those business magnates. In addition, there were letters from some collateral families. Finally, he said to the butler, "Read the letters to me, butler." The butler quickly picked up the first letter in his hand and read it aloud. "The weather will soon be fine, and merchant ships will begin to shuttle back and forth. It seems they want to do something. There's also news that they want to do something to help the ducal family." Decarno really wanted to laugh. Actually, he wanted to scorn these people. Doing nothing is already helping. Why don't they think about that? He turned around, not wanting to hear any more of these insincere words. Burn all the letters. But suddenly, a letter caught his eye, drawing Decarno's attention, and he immediately said, "Wait, who sent that letter? It doesn't have any symbols or decorations." The butler also picked it up to examine it. This one. He read the handwriting on the letter. It was a letter from Miss O'Hara. Hearing her name, Decarno immediately said to the butler, "Give it to me." As soon as Decarno opened the letter, he could imagine her writing it. "Duke Tiz, I am sorry to bid farewell in this manner. Although we went through many difficulties, I do not regret the time we spent together. I do not hate you, nor do I resent you. Please consider this broken engagement as my extravagance." Decarno sat in his chair, his hand gripping the letter tighter. "What I can do at this moment is to forget you as soon as possible, even if only for a day. I am in a place far from the ducal estate, and I want to start a new life. I wish your family increasing glory and prosperity." Eva's voice and smile seemed to appear before Decarno's eyes, making him feel a slight regret. Evangeline O'Hara. Looking at this line of elegant handwriting, Decarno's feelings were indescribable. He rested his forehead in his hand. My heart feels so heavy." Decarno looked up and saw another letter that looked the same in the butler's hand. So he asked, "There's another letter of the same color. Is it also from that woman?" The butler opened it to confirm. "Yes. But this letter is not for your grace, but for Rex in the annex, with a message requesting it be read in Rex's presence." Decarno rubbed his forehead, a headache coming on. "Also want to take that letter. Give it to me now." Those elegant characters appeared again. The letter to Rex filled with affection and written very warmly. "To Rex, my little one and eternal companion, forever loving and missing you." Seeing the letter's contents, the butler felt an indescribable emotion. This letter was 3 times longer than the one to the Duke. The one sent to the Duke. After reading the letter, Decarno completely broke down, not because of the sorrow of parting, but because of disappointment and an uncomfortable feeling of suffocation. "Evangeline, to you, was I that kind of person?" At this time, in a house in Mareport, Eva, the girl who was causing Duke Tiz such a headache, was sitting by the window enjoying tea and refreshments. Keith approached her and then said, "Speaking of which, Miss, why did you come to visit my grandmother? Didn't you say you had something to discuss?" Eva turned her head to look at him, then continued softly, Actually, I have something I want to ask my nanny." Keith picked up his teacup and took a sip, casually asking her, "What is it? Since you mentioned it, just say it." Eva looked at the teacup in her hands, hesitating hesitating to speak, and after a moment, she said with a slightly forced smile, "I'm curious about the whereabouts of my divorced mother." This was indeed shocking news, and Keith immediately spat out the tea he had just sipped. Seeing his impoliteness, he feigned a few coughs, regained his usual expression, and then continued, "I'm sorry. Perhaps I asked a question I shouldn't have." But Eva still maintained her smile. "It's all right." She looked away, her thoughts probably drifting far again. "I'm just curious about what kind of person she was. I don't have any memories of my mother, but I thought perhaps Nanny, who served our family for many years, would know her. She remembered her childhood, thanks to her father's love. She never felt she lacked a mother's love." But that day, a very ordinary day, little Eva walked up to her father and asked, "Dad, how are children born without a mother?" A child's innocent curiosity always appears without warning. She only saw her father bend down, calling her name in a low voice. Evangeline. At that time, she remembered very clearly, perhaps even now, the expression on her father's face. "So I couldn't ask about my mother. After I grew a little older, I vaguely heard a story. Shortly after I was born, my mother divorced my father and left alone." Mentioning this, Keith asked with some curiosity, "Why are you curious about news of your mother now?" Eva lowered her eyelids. She was truly confused. "I don't know." The scene where Decarno told me everything that day, hearing his words, suddenly made me curious. Assuming I had a child, even if I'm not pregnant now, I already have the desire to protect my child. How could my mother leave me like that? She was lost in her own thoughts. I don't need to say these words. In the end, she chose not to tell Keith the truth for no particular reason. She looked out at the sea. "I just want to know if after my father passed away, there's still someone connected to me by blood. I am not the protagonist of a fairy tale, nor do I expect anything extraordinary to happen. But I'm sorry." Keith spoke again at this moment, interrupting Eva's monologue. "Among the people I've met, you most resemble the protagonist of a fairy tale." But Keith's train of thought seemed quite simple, so he didn't dwell in sentimentality for too long and quickly returned to normal. "Actually, I rarely read fairy tales. It's just a feeling." This remark made Eva laugh happily, a laugh she probably hadn't had in a long time. "What are you talking about?" Keith unconsciously laughed along with her. Time flew by, and the sun had already risen high. Eva and Keith took a walk nearby together. Keith, who had been silent for a long time, then spoke. "Anyway, it'll be hard for you to get the answers you want because my grandmother's memory is erratic." However, Eva felt that this was enough. "Just seeing Nanny makes me content, so it's okay." Mentioning Nanny, she started to worry again. More importantly, Nanny's illness. "Why don't you take Nanny to a big hospital in the capital? Maybe there's still hope." Keith had tried, but he had already resigned himself to fate. "If it were any other illness, I wouldn't say anything, but this is senile dementia. There's nothing that can be done. It's better to let her live comfortably every day." That's what the doctor said. Eva still insisted he must try, but that's just a countryside doctor. If you listen to the advice of other doctors, perhaps there might be an unexpected turn. The next second, this person, for some reason, suddenly burst out laughing. He even solemnly introduced himself with a straight face. "I am that countryside doctor. I am Mareport's countryside doctor, and I am treating my grandmother." This was completely unexpected, so Eva was still a bit dazed. Seeing her stunned look, Keith was very pleased and laughed even louder. After laughing to his heart's content, he revealed his disguise. "Are you thinking, how could such an impolite person be a doctor, right?" Eva was being led around in circles by him, and now being asked this, she quickly denied. "No, I wasn't." Keith pretended to be magnanimous, continuing to walk while chattering. "It's okay if you weren't, but your eyes look suspicious." Eva turned away in annoyance and walked off, explaining, "Keith, you're mistaken." Keith wouldn't give up and still pressed. "Tell me the truth, my lady. Don't call me that." After arriving in Mareport, Eva said to Keith, "I'm going to sightsee at the port. Keith, you go about your business." Just then, a carriage suddenly sped towards them. It appeared out of nowhere. Eva didn't seem to sense the danger. Hearing Keith shout miss, she thought he was joking again and turned to tell him to stop. "Keith, stop playing." The next second, she was pulled close by Keith. Eva screamed in fright. Fortunately, the carriage didn't hit them. Keith still held Eva, watching the carriage drive away, then turned back to tease her. "I think calling you watch out this time was also redundant." It took half a minute before they realized their standing posture was a bit ambiguous. They immediately loosened their hold on each other slightly, an awkward atmosphere enveloping them, looking silly. Thank you." Keith was a bit embarrassed. "I should say, It was my discourtesy. The harbor was very crowded at this time, everyone bustling about. In the end, Keith still accompanied her. The two of them looked outside. So many people. Yes, because the wind direction changed, many ships have docked here. At this moment, Keith suddenly remembered something. Ah, Ernie's merchant ship is also docked there. Eva's eyes widened. That clueless little fellow often asks about it. She was the same. Isn't Ernie where we trade with other countries? Keith nodded in agreement, explaining, yes. Before, even if merchant ships came, they wouldn't even bother to look. But this time, for some reason, they came on their own. However, when they came, they just took a look from the coast and left. Therefore, I don't have high hopes this time either. The two watched the frantically shouting merchants. The whole village was in chaos, and his grandmother's memory recovery was uncertain. If you want to do anything here, you'll have to wait until the situation settles down a bit later. Keith turned to Eva and asked, so, is there anything you want to do? Eva hesitated for a long time, finally saying, I want to earn money. I have to eat to live. Keith didn't know why, but seeing her like this, he was also somewhat moved. Meanwhile, at the royal banquet, a girl's gentle, petal-like voice sounded, Your Grace is the food to your liking. This was addressed to Decarno. The one who had just spoken was Her Highness the Princess. The princess stepped forward and continued her previous topic. I paid special attention to these, hoping to make your grace feel more comfortable. Look over there. These are gifts from Governor General Addis, she said, looking at the two foxes in front of her. It was his son, the heir, who sent them on behalf of his father. At this moment, she happened to mention Rex, just wanted to find a topic to chat with Decarno. His Grace the Duke also has a lion dog brought back from the north, right? If His Grace likes dogs. But before she could finish, Decarno, for some reason in a bad mood, interrupted her. Sorry, Princess, I actually don't quite like dogs. His tone now could be described as extremely gloomy, let alone lion dogs. Verona had wanted to chat with this person, but ended up being rebuffed, and she felt a little uncomfortable. Yes, just then, King Aiden's voice rang out. It's a bit cold, Duke 'tis. We haven't seen each other in a long time. Relax a little. Seeing the newcomer, Decarno bowed, Your Majesty. Aiden felt such a greeting was too distant. There's no need for such formalities between us. More importantly, I have two young men I'd like to introduce to you, so I brought them to see you. He introduced the first person. This is Anders, Count Rebel of Addis's eldest son. For some reason, Decarno's expression suddenly darkened. As he looked at the person behind Anders, the second son, Mr. Killian, Anders and Killian, the two brothers stood solemnly, waiting for Aiden to finish speaking. Afterward, Anders stepped forward and introduced himself. It is a great honor to meet you. I am Anders of the Rebel family. Because my father often mentions the Tiz ducal family to us, I have always looked forward to meeting you in person. While his older brother was speaking, Killian kept staring at Decarno. Decarno did the same. Is that so? The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Seeing the atmosphere was too tense, Aiden stepped forward again to smooth things over. All right, don't be so stiff. Look at this snake. It crawled onto me at some point. The black snake emerged from Aiden's hand, showing everyone its heart-shaped tongue. Thanks to Mr. Anders, I was able to see these rare animals. I'm very happy. Anders also smiled happily. Thank you, Your Majesty. Returning to the main topic, Aiden said, so this time I'm considering arranging a position for Mr. Anders. As far as I know, Mr. Anders managed a port when he was in Addis. I wonder how the supervision work on our west coast would be. Let me think, in the western region there's Filson, Tanner, and Mare. It was unknown if it touched a sore spot, but upon hearing the word Mare, Decarno's body immediately stiffened. Michael's voice, when he reported to him, still echoed in his ears. Miss O'Hara is staying in Mare and has gone to a small town west of Mare. It seems the nanny who raised her lives there. For some reason, Decarno suddenly remembered the scene of Eva. She stood there, her face towards the sea. Mare, the Emperor, while playing with the snake, replied, That's right. Isn't it a good thing for the Duke to entrust the supervision work to Mr. Anders? If the supervision work is given to Mr. Anders, your workload in the upper house will also be reduced. Decarno had always been straightforward, so he wasn't afraid of conflict. I see, secretly tailing and interfering in such matters. That suits you, Anders, quite well. This surprised Anders, but the Emperor continued, Well, the supervision work, it's pretty much like that. Decarno turned to leave. The greetings are probably enough. I'll take my leave now. Princess Verona saw Decarno leaving and wanted to stop him. Hey, Duke 'tis. But Aiden immediately stopped her. Verona, you'd better not follow him. Verona, unable to speak to her beloved, immediately turned to her brother to complain and reprimand him. The Duke finally came here. Why do you always interfere? Aiden, used to this, put his hand to his ear and said, I could tell at a glance he was in a bad mood. Verona seemed about to cry. She choked out, if I don't say it now, then when? Aiden said softly, too noisy. Decarno left the Emperor's group, seemingly not wanting to stay any longer, and went straight back. Michael was standing outside waiting. Seeing his master return, he spoke. You're back so early. Decarno put on his coat and replied, is there any reason to stay longer? Michael, somewhat flustered, tried to persuade him. Even so, this is a royal banquet after all. Just then, a young man's voice called out to him, Your Grace. Decarno turned around. Sure enough, he had followed. He thought to himself, this captain has something to say to me. Kalin took a step forward, his expression firm. Yes, Your Grace. Upon seeing you, regarding your attitude, I have a few words I'd like to say. Decarno thought to himself, this kid wants to seek justice for his family. How interesting. Kalin continued, I know your grace holds a grudge against our family, but if you take out your personal resentment on my father and older brother because of it, I believe that is improper. This surprised both Decarno and Michael. Decarno stood still and asked, so what do you want to say? Kalin slowly replied, please apologize. Unexpectedly, Decarno showed an even more disgusted expression. Apologize. Kalin still tried to maintain the most appropriate demeanor. Your Grace. Decarno took a step forward and said, what if I also have a personal grudge against your brother? Kalin also began to show displeasure. Please don't go too far. My brother met you for the first time today. Could it be that during our conversation, just now, you felt emotionally hurt? At this moment, Decarno took out a cigarette and lit it, asking, after returning to the capital, what has your talented brother been up to? Decarno's eyes turned gloomy as he sized up Kalin. It seems you don't know anything. He reached out and patted Kalin's shoulder, and you dare to demand an apology from me. Then his hand tightened its grip. Decarno's usually very deep voice was now even colder. Why don't you go ask Eva and hear what your brother said to her? It was only then that Kalin realized what the problem was, and he asked in confusion, when on earth did my brother go to see Eva? He was somewhat saddened, but more so hopeful. Could it be because of that Eva pushed me away? Seeing his unsurprised expression, Decarno continued, don't misunderstand. Even if your brother hadn't come first, Eva would definitely have rejected you. But suffering such blows one after another, he still struggled to retort. It seems your excellency believes you understand. Eva very well. Sure enough, these words made Decarno's expression change. What? Kalin raised the corners of his mouth triumphantly. After all these years of reunion, I can understand her sorrow, but your excellency, you simply cannot comprehend it. Decarno, not wanting to admit defeat, pressed on, so what? But with the aura he'd possessed since childhood, these words seemed to only shake him for a moment. Will saying these things lessen the pain of your unrequited love? Kalin wanted to retort, you. Just then, he suddenly heard someone call his name. Kalin. In the crowd, Anders was looking for him. What did this kid run off to? Not wanting to worry his brother, he could only swallow his anger and leave. Watching his retreating figure was very interesting. Michael, who had seen everything from beginning to end, said angrily, how can a mere captain be so disrespectful? I will report to Mr. Palayan immediately and have him properly disciplined. But Decarno didn't seem to want that. No need, let him be. He seemed to have other plans in mind, turning around. Let's go too. The carriage departed quickly. In the carriage leaving the royal palace, Decarno lowered his eyelids, lost in thought. What exactly are you trying to achieve by doing? He recalled Eva's voice, filled with emptiness from earlier. Myself. She stood before him, her voice as light as falling petals. I've lost my father. I have no family left. All that remains is myself. Decarno clenched his fists, repeating the girl's name. Eva, 'tis is your home, and the day I become your family is not far off, is it? Even so, you still chose to leave. Looking at the bustling traffic outside, Decarno asked himself, so, Eva, are you satisfied with your life in Mare? Finally, he made a crucial decision to resolve the questions constantly popping up in his mind. I have no choice but to confirm it myself. At this moment, Eva was at the seaside with Keith, who was shouting her name loudly. Miss. His voice grew louder. Miss Eva. And at that moment, Eva was inside, washing dishes. She turned her head and found Keith had already come in. He put down a rather heavy box, making a loud noise. He seemed to have a dissatisfied look on his face. Seriously, you really are a one-of-a-kind young lady. These are your things. Eva smiled brightly. She looked at Keith and then praised him. As expected of Keith, it wasn't difficult, was it? Keith cursed angrily. This rascal. He just remembered how she had pleaded with him earlier. Can you help me sell these jewels? He was so angry he kept cursing. Who asked a man they just met to help them sell jewels? Do you know how shocked I was then? What if I sold everything and ran off? Eva remained completely unfazed, stating methodically, Keith has no reason to abandon his nanny and run away. Otherwise, I must have misjudged you. Keith opened the box and said helplessly, I wish you wouldn't say that. All right, come and count the money. He explained in more detail. I sold them for a bit higher than the market price, but the problem is everyone thought I was stealing. Eva unexpectedly wanted to laugh. Oh my, really? Then, she stated her reason. Why did I ask for your help? If an outsider like me suddenly went out to sell jewels, I would definitely arouse suspicion. She still smiled brightly and thanked him. Thanks to you, I was able to raise the money so smoothly. Thank you very much. Keith could no longer hide his curiosity and asked directly, what do you plan to do with this huge sum of money? In response, Eva gave him another smile. I already have a plan. Later on the beach, Keith approached Eva and said, Mississippi Eva, holding beautiful purple flowers in her hand, turned to look at him. Didn't you say you wanted to make money? Why are you loitering on the beach all day? Picking flowers. She quickly explained to this fool, because I have to prepare the goods before I can do business. Keith vaguely understood a little. Are you saying those flowers are the goods? But he still had to tell her the truth, to stop her from daydreaming. I'm sorry to say this, but those flowers won't sell. That's cannock, a flower that only blooms on the beach. Compared to other easily obtainable things, it's not very useful. Keith's tone became increasingly contemptuous of the flower. This flower is neither beautiful nor can it be used as medicine. People even call it the tasteless flower of the underworld. He sincerely wanted to advise this aspiring entrepreneur one more time. So, miss, you should look for other goods. But in response, Eva just smiled. She kept smiling like that, making Keith wonder, Miss, why are you smiling? Then, Eva explained with a smile, don't worry, these aren't for selling. Is that so? Of course. Then, before he could finish his sentence, he received even more shocking news. I'm going to buy them. Keith felt as if several bolts of lightning had struck his ears. A few days later, at the nanny's house, Eva handed the gold coins to the seller, saying, at 1 gold coin per kilogram, I'll buy a total of 5 gold coins worth. The seller happily clutched the money in his hand, as if he had struck a fortune, and thanked her warmly. Thank you. You've really bought all the cannock flowers. Thank you so much, Eva. Eva also smiled in response. I should be the one thanking you. If you pick more flowers, come and sell them to me. Okay, of course, of course. Keith, sitting behind them, looked bewildered. He stepped forward, wanting to ask Eva again, Miss, why are you spending money to collect cannock flowers? He really wanted to persuade her to give up. Do you really think this is a commodity? Who would buy such common flowers? Eva deliberately turned to him and said, these are flowers for Ernio. She explained more clearly to Keith. Purple is the symbolic color of Ernio's state religion. This weekend, the biggest annual event will be held at the temple. In such a grand event, lavish decorations are indispensable. They will need purple flowers similar to the symbolic color of the state religion. Keith also understood a little. He placed his hand on his chin, thinking, but cannock flowers are everywhere on the beach. Will they come to Mare to buy flowers? Eva looked very certain. Of course. My father said that the sea level has been rising for 10 years. By now, half of the coast of the Ernio Island nation must have been submerged. While collecting these purple flowers, she continued to say to Keith, in that case, is the reason the Ernians came to Mare this time just to wander along the coast and then leave? Keith finally realized the shocking truth. He blurted out, it's to find cannock flowers, a flower that is now hard to find on their island. Keith was a little flustered and whispered, if that's the case, then you've struck it rich, Mississippi. She put on her hat, intending to go out. Then, holding the prepared documents in her hand, she smiled happily and said excitedly, if I complete the final procedures tonight. Mare Town Hall. Keith came here with her. He looked at the electric tower in front of him and had a vague premonition of misfortune. Isn't it too late to go to the government agency now? Eva, standing next to him, spoke. To participate in tomorrow's dawn market, I need permission from the government agency. I heard that today. I just need to register. She pulled down her hat, covering half of her face, and said, let's go in. Keith continued to look at her curiously. Is it necessary to wear that hat? She turned around, smiled at him, and then replied, until I get the stall, it's better if no one knows me. At this moment, she noticed the notice posted in front of the town hall door. The seal of the mayor town hall of the upper house is under the jurisdiction of the upper house. She felt a little uneasy and worried in her heart. I've deliberately stayed away from the capital, but every time I see something related to that person, I get shaken. As she walked, she comforted herself. It's okay. Decarno is involved in many things. It's natural for the upper house's seal to be everywhere. Don't worry. Just live your own life. As she walked, she couldn't help but smile. It was a smile of satisfaction and happiness that she hadn't felt for a long time. I don't know how long it's been since things went so smoothly. Now I have a small stall in front of the port. Then, as soon as she entered, she heard the angry voices of several merchants from inside. Deadline. What are you talking about? There was an argument inside. A merchant said, "You said we could register until tonight." Suddenly, a VIP arrived. "So you ended it early, and the street stalls are already full." These people all felt it was unfair and didn't want to leave. "No, so soon. Let me talk to the mayor directly." At this moment, a subordinate suddenly said, "You've come at the right time." Eva turned around. Her face immediately darkened. Following behind the mayor was Decarno, the person she least wanted to see. Why is that person here? Keith didn't know the relationship between them, so at this moment, he wanted to go out with Eva to see what was going on. "Miss, let's go over there and see what the situation is." But Eva suddenly turned around and said, "No, let's go back for today." Keith saw her nervous look and asked with some confusion, but he still followed her. "Yes, you came all this way." Mississippi Eva walked too fast, and Keith chased after her, shouting, "Miss, wait." The mayor then turned around and said to Decarno with some unease, "I'm very sorry for causing this commotion, Your Excellency. It's time to arrange the stalls for the port market, so everyone is very tense." Decarno didn't seem to care much and replied, "It's all right, continue." After that, he said cryptically, "Because from now on, things will get interesting." Eva accidentally dropped her hat while fleeing, but she didn't want to go back for it. The hat lay quietly on the ground. Decarno silently watched the direction Eva had gone, his thoughts unreadable. Eva's hat lay on the ground, basking quietly in the sunlight. That night, at the nanny's house, Eva sat by the coffee table, a cup of tea brought by Keith beside her. Keith stared at the tea from when it was steaming until it no longer let off steam, and asked Eva, "The tea is cold. Shall I make you a new cup?" Eva was curled up, her hands clasped around her legs, seemingly deep in thought. Hearing him call her, she replied, "Ah, no need." Then she added with a smile, "I'm fine." The smile on Eva's lips was clearly forced, and it froze after a moment. Keith, keenly aware of this, didn't beat around the bush and said directly to her, "If you're too tired, don't force yourself. Just cry it out." Eva was taken aback by his words. "What?" Keith poured her a new cup of tea and said softly, just make yourself comfortable here." At this, Eva relaxed slightly, a faint sadness on her face, and then said softly, "Thank you for not asking me anything." Keith corrected her, "There are many more things to be thankful for." He turned around. Everyone has their own difficulties. Keith picked up a coat and put it on, seeming to be heading somewhere, and casually left Eva with some instructions. "You rest. It was hard to get those flowers. It's a waste to just leave them there. Even if it's a small stall, it doesn't matter. I'll go see if there's any place to set up and sell them." Eva immediately stood up, wanted to go out with Keith. "In that case, I'll go with you." But Keith flatly refused her in a stern tone. "No, you stay home, Mississippi." He was like a strict older brother, reminding his sister to take care of her health. "This is a doctor's order. You can't disobey." After giving his instructions, Keith left. Eva sat back down in her chair, and only then did she truly return to her usual self, her head bowed, processing what had just happened. Decarno, why would he come a mayor? Just seeing him makes my heart heavy. The memory of her panic at that moment was still vivid. Her mind had gone blank. All she knew was to run. Eva felt like a caged bird, her every move watched. Trying to live in the present, doing the best I can. There's nothing shameful about that. Eva felt very confused and lost at this moment. Maybe it's because my emotions are unstable that I'm like this. She decided to get up and do something because sitting idly would make her overthink. "I'll go arrange those flowers." Just then, there was a sudden knock on the door. Eva felt a little nervous, perhaps because she was overthinking who would knock at this hour. She walked to the door, calling out, "Keith, is that you?" As the door opened, she continued, "Did you forget something?" But unexpectedly, the person she least wanted to see at this moment appeared at the door. Eva started to panic, her brows furrowed, and asked with a lack of confidence, "Your Grace, what are you doing here?" Decarno was certainly not pleased to see Eva's panicked reaction upon seeing him. He didn't answer her question, but instead retorted, "That expression of yours, it's as if you've seen a ghost. I came to see you. Are you that surprised?" Or, he paused here, then looked at her with sad eyes. "It seems you were expecting someone else." Eva didn't want to stay and talk with this person any longer, so she tried to send him away. "If you came to mock me, then please leave." Unexpectedly, Decarno didn't care about her attitude, only wanting to remind her, "After you're done with your business in Mare, go back." Eva refused. "No, I will stay here." Her gaze shifted to the flowers behind her as she asked, "Do you see the flowers behind me?" Her gaze returned to Decarno, her eyes firm. "I have to sell them all. As the heir to the Ocala Trading Company, I intend to continue my father's path in business." Decarno looked at her helplessly. "You're going to sell flowers?" Eva nodded frankly. "Yes. I even went to the town hall today to get a permit to set up a stall at the dawn market." Silence fell again in the space, the two just looking at each other without a word. Finally, Decarno turned his face away, his voice tinged with regret and persistence. "I really don't understand why you're staying in a place like this. You left me to come to this remote place." Eva's heart beat fast, proof of her extreme nervousness. Decarno continued, "But just to make a living. Do you really think this is a good way to live?" Decarno's words came from the heart, but Eva didn't hear a single word he said, replying coolly, "Yes, it's very good," with an expression as cold as a sword. Each word pierced straight into Decarno's heart. "Much better than living in that house with you." However, when talking about other people, Eva's voice suddenly became gentle, like a spring breeze. "The people here have accepted the real me." The faces of everyone floated in her mind. Keith, the nanny, everyone here. Here, there's no need to wear a false mask, nor does she need to wear a fancy necklace to prove herself. She recalled those days as if imprisoned in a cage, a suffocating fear. Then, she finally said to him coldly, "The Duke and I are now people from two different worlds." She finally said what she wanted to say. Eva decisively turned to see him out. "So please leave. I still have to tend to the flowers." But Decarno couldn't accept it. He quickly grabbed her hand. Eva repeated firmly, "Decarno, I said leave." He pulled her closer, requesting in a gentle tone, "It's all right. If it's late, I'll wait for you at the town hall." Eva angrily shook off Decarno's hand. "Why would I go there to see you?" Decarno replied with a calm and composed expression, "Didn't you say you had to sell flowers?" Finally, before leaving, Decarno's gaze remained firm. He would definitely wait there for Eva until she came. "You are pursuing what you want, so there's no reason you can't tolerate even someone like me." The moon had risen high. It seemed it was already quite late. Keith opened the door and walked in. "I'm back." As soon as he entered, he began to tell Eva the situation. "I found out there are no more spots to set up a stall. It seems the market manager took money and sold the stalls in advance." Keith walked over to Eva and continued, "So people like us, who knew nothing, are already a step too late." Eva nodded in agreement, just as I thought. Keith couldn't help but sigh. "I know life is like this, but this is too much." Then he noticed Eva wearing her coat. "Miss, are you planning to go out this hour?" Eva, walking towards the door, said somewhat unnaturally, "Yes, because I have to start my business tomorrow." Keith, unaware of what had happened after he left, just thought Eva was really going out because of the flower-selling business. So he reminded her, "Are you planning to use money to buy a spot that other vendors have already bribed for? Don't do that. It won't work without a lot of money." Eva's hand was already on the doorknob, and she only replied, "No." After that, her expression became firm, but also tinged with helplessness. "At this time, I will use another method." It was indeed quite late outside. Inside the town hall, the mayor of Mare was still standing. Decarno, still standing in his original spot, spoke. "I said you could leave." The mayor still wanted to stay. "Your Grace, how can you say that? Your Grace is here, but as the mayor, shouldn't I be at my post?" Responding to him was Decarno's back. The mayor had been puzzled for a long time. "Strange. I heard Count Rebelson was coming to take up the post of inspector. Why is Duke Tiz here?" Looking at the clock, which was about to point to midnight, Decarno still showed no intention of leaving, which was very strange. "Does he have some business at the town hall? He still doesn't want to leave at this hour." I originally thought Tiz was just an outsider, so I didn't pay much attention. I didn't expect to bring this trouble upon myself like this. He was lost in random thoughts. Suddenly, Decarno's low voice sounded. "You two are skillfully using words, hoping I'll leave quickly." The mayor shivered and stammered. "No, how would I dare to do that? It's because I saw your Grace personally come all this way that I feel invigorated, that's why. And I was worried you wouldn't be satisfied with the merchants who came here." Hearing this, Decarno suddenly fell silent, thinking about other things. The image of Eva from the afternoon still lingered in his memory. Do you see the flowers behind me? I have to sell them all. He also remembered vaguely saying to Eva that he wanted to meet. It's all right. If it's late, I'll wait for you at the town hall. Decarno's brow furrowed deeply. He really couldn't understand what Eva was thinking. If she needs a place to sell flowers, she just needs to come to me, and the problem will be solved. Afterwards, he looked at the still-closed main gate of the town hall, an indescribable unease welling up in his heart. In the end, she's still stubbornly refusing my help. The image of Eva at the ceremony in the afternoon, beautiful and noble, standing among the commoners. When I saw you in this ordinary port city, I couldn't help but laugh. Then he thought of how she looked when she saw him, quickly turning around and finally running far away, leaving behind her beautiful wide-brimmed hat. Did you think that by wearing that hat, I wouldn't recognize you at that time? Eva, of course, didn't know, and even now you still haven't realized how eye-catching I am. At this hour, what floated into Decarno's mind were the days before, a bit lost at a stalemate, and his longing for Eva. I have no reason to pursue Eva after she left me. How is she now? Is she doing well? And then after that, he realized these questions were merely out of an instinct to confirm for himself. Yes, nothing more. He had stubbornly thought so, but then the image of Keith happily waving to Eva, saying I'm back, and the way he gently reminded her, Miss, please rest well. His receding figure in the sunlight, all entered Decarno's eyes. He clenched his jaw, his face contorted hideously. Decarno's previously relaxed hands began to clench into fists. Who is that man? The sight of them together was an eyesore. She relied more on a man she had known for less than a month than on me, the one she had promised to marry. Just then, the clock struck midnight, and the chimes rang out. The mayor of Mare, still standing behind him, could wait no longer. He then mustered his courage and spoke. Your Grace, it is already midnight. Let us return. I have prepared a hotel for you by the sea. Decarno remained standing like a statue, saying coolly. The mayor asked again, are you leaving now? I will see you all the way there. But Decarno interrupted him. Don't you still have work to do? The intention to dismiss him was clear. The mayor only dared to answer with one word, yes. And then he left. At this point, Decarno spoke again, simultaneously changing the subject. There's quite a bit of paperwork left over from the day. The mayor cleverly kept up with Decarno pace, and he quickly replied, are you referring to the matter of arranging the stall locations? I completed that task long ago. He even smiled happily, seemingly trying to curry favor, placing his hand on his chest as he told him. Because the locations were all assigned in advance, I don't need to look at the new applications submitted today. At this, Decarno seized upon an important issue, then nonchalantly feigned a question. It's strange that you don't need to review these applications. I recall the notice stating that the deadline for submitting applications is today. The mayor had experienced many such inspections from superiors and handled them with ease. Yes, that is indeed the official processing time. However, I wanted to give more spots to those who were truly sincere. He had even prepared his excuses in advance. Decarno's mood suddenly darkened. The mayor didn't understand who had caused this. He said sarcastically, what good can come from a city managed by someone as shameless as you? The mayor froze on the spot, certainly not wanting to understand the meaning behind Decarno's recent words. Yes. What are you talking about? Decarno was flipping through the documents, offering some criticism, essentially questioning and pointing out the mayor's crimes. The approved applications were all submitted long before the official processing date, and those who received spots lacked nothing. All of them belonged to the wealthy class. Finally, he summarized with one sentence, leaving the mayor speechless and pale. It seems you can't bring yourself to say you accepted bribes. Speaking of which, Decarno remembered Eva's worried face. Thanks to that good deed, those who truly need stalls. The mayor indeed suffered a heavy psychological blow. His previous fluency vanished, and he stammered an explanation. I apologize, Your Grace, but I have my own reasons. The next second, Decarno's eyes flashed with anger. He reached out and threw all those documents in the mayor's face. He spoke with both anger and threat. I am in a very bad mood right now. He still wanted to create some benefit for Eva, so he had to rectify this matter. That nonsense is useless. So, how do you plan to take responsibility? You should think about it carefully. That would be better. At this time, The wind and waves at sea were very strong. Keith had only just boarded the boat and was tossed by the waves, vomiting several times, looking miserable. Eva quickly came over to support him, asking kindly, "Keith, are you all right?" Keith wiped his mouth, his face a ghastly green as he looked at Eva, then asked for the nth time in distress, "Miss, is this really the best way?" Eva also felt apologetic and lowered her voice. "I'm sorry, Keith. You didn't have to come with me either." Who knew she was just trying to make a small joke, but Keith took it seriously and scolded her loudly. "How could I leave you alone in the middle of the night? That's a strange thing to say." Eva knew she had gone a bit too far and smiled perfunctorily. Keith calmed down and then thought, "I was very surprised when she suddenly left home in the middle of the night." In any case, he also had his own suspicions, worrying that she was going to meet Decarno. But unexpectedly, the place she went to was not the town hall, but a sailor's tavern. At this point, Keith sobered up and still turned to Eva to ask, "But why do you have to board a boat so early in the morning?" Eva enthusiastically told her trusted companion her plan. "I must find a new location that no one is using. Doing business in the port requires a government permit, but transactions between small sailboats do not." Keith was both shocked and happy when he heard this information. He had clearly investigated, but didn't know this. "When did you find this out?" Unexpectedly, Eva smiled happily, her gentle voice ringing out, "This is just common sense." At this moment, Keith didn't know what he saw, but he suddenly walked to the side of the boat and then shouted loudly, "Miss." He looked into the distance and saw a large ship approaching. "Isn't that Ernio's ship?" Eva was also delighted. "Ah, that's right. She saw the person she wanted to meet." Keith felt a somewhat unfounded worry and asked, "Are we really going to ask them to buy these flowers?" Eva lowered her eyelids, a hint of an indiscernible strangeness in her voice. No, she was very excited, so her voice also emphasized that it would be them begging us to sell. I don't know where Eva found a hair tie. She picked it up and deftly tied her hair, every movement decisive and graceful. Keith approached her and asked something. "What's the point of meticulously tidying up your appearance before trade?" Eva simply replied to him, "For a merchant, appearance is everything." As she combed her hair, she said, "Even if merchants don't read books, they know that the first thing that catches the eye isn't the product, but the other party's attitude." At this point, a childhood memory suddenly flooded her mind. Her father, Count O'Hara, holding her, said to her, "Eva, the higher you hold your head, the more they will look at you with admiration. Don't forget, you yourself are the most precious asset." Pulling herself from the memory, Eva placed a comb and some cosmetics on the table. "This is also one of Father's teachings. I will keep these teachings in mind and walk firmly on the path to becoming a merchant." Just then, a stranger's voice suddenly rang out, tinged with an indescribable wariness. "Who is blocking the way?" Eva reacted very quickly. She stepped forward and replied, "Are you the one sent by Ernio? I've been waiting for you." The merchant was somewhat surprised by this answer. "Waiting for us?" He looked Eva up and down with a scrutinizing gaze. From her sincere appearance and perfectly appropriate politeness, he guessed, could she have come out to sea to do business with us? He turned his head to look at the boat they were on. Its hull was small. It looked old, like a fishing boat. But this was enough for him to reply, "I must apologize to those who are waiting for us, but we have nothing to trade. We still need to go to Mareport." Eva, eager to stop their ship, said with some agitation, "Not so fast. Please hear me out first." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with sincerity and a touch of the shrewdness peculiar to ship merchants. "Perhaps my goods are exactly what you need." After speaking, she turned and shouted loudly, "Keith! Keith, it's thanks to you." At this, Keith, as if awaiting an order, heard his name and immediately came out holding a bouquet of flowers. After Keith put down the flowers, Eva said with satisfaction and confidence, "This is a bouquet of purple carnations, bearing the symbolic color of Ernio's state religion. As you can see, my flowers are top quality, still fresh, with no signs of wilting." Presenting the goods indeed surprised the merchant, making him pause and listen for a moment. The woman beside him, likely the merchant's wife, then spoke, "Oh, if those are canic flowers, aren't they the flowers we've been looking for?" But the merchant still seemed unconvinced, or rather, he was still somewhat perplexed. "They're indeed the flowers we are looking for, but we only plan to take a look while purchasing other goods, as they aren't very necessary." Eva revealed a gentle smile. Her voice, filled with an enigmatic tone, rang out, "Is that so? But rather than those words, wouldn't it be more accurate to say that you have meticulously prepared to wait for these flowers? Unseen seen by them. She had already carefully observed their large ship. The water tanks on your merchant ship, which appear empty at first glance, actually have a thin layer of water at the bottom. If you intended to buy them all, you would have traded on the spot, on your ship, but you didn't. An image of the merchant appears. I must apologize to those who are waiting for us, but we have nothing to trade. Eva's voice, accompanied by the sound of the waves, continued to echo very vividly. Moreover, as far as I know, aren't you planning a grand event in Ernio? Isn't that why you've come to buy flowers? The merchant remained stubborn, unwilling to lose to Eva. Even so, we could buy countless of these flowers once we reach Mareport. Eva responded cheerfully. I'm afraid that will be difficult. After saying this, she showed a very radiant, yet somewhat innocent smile, because I've already bought all the canic flowers from the mayor. This time, it truly dealt a heavy blow to the people on the merchant ship. Everyone's expression darkened. What? But Eva wasn't the type to enjoy seeing others angry or worried, so she immediately continued. Don't worry, these are flowers to be offered to the temple, so I won't ask for too high a price. She held up 2 fingers, indicating the price for these beautiful flowers, 20 gold coins per box. I believe that's quite reasonable. Unexpectedly, this group of people was stunned by the price. So they shouted, "Hey, are you kidding? Canic flowers grow on beaches. How can they be?" Eva slowly revealed the truth that silenced the crowd for a moment. But it is also a flower that no longer exists. On Ernio Island, we can buy them from elsewhere. Eva wasn't too affected by these psychological tactics. Like her father, she calmly played the role of a true merchant and continued to persuade them. But carnations bought from elsewhere will wilt during your return journey, because the flower's freshness only lasts for 5 days. I plan to buy all the canic roots in Mare and build a garden dedicated to growing canic in the future. But I promise to give you well-cared-for flowers that you can use for decoration immediately. Finally, she concluded, what do you think? The merchant's face was not pleasant to look at after hearing this. He gritted his teeth, turned around, and indicated that he no longer wanted to receive guests. Even so, we cannot trade with you. Silence fell between them, with only the sound of the surging waves. Keith, at a loss, turned to Eva and whispered, Miss, what do we do now? The merchant turned away, still harboring an indescribable resentment. You people look down on us islanders, so you deliberately inflate the prices, thinking we're easy to fool. Just then, Eva's voice sounded again. It's a pity I prepared these flowers for you, Firminio, but now I have to throw them all away. It's unknown how these words made the person who originally wanted to leave turn back to look at them. He couldn't control his voice and suddenly shouted loudly, what are you doing? His voice carried extreme anger. Why would you throw away such precious flowers? Eva grasped the key point and immediately stated her reason. They are not precious to you. They are just ordinary flowers, not worth buying. Facing the angry faces opposite her, Eva calmly continued. I only have 3 boxes of carnations left here. You decide. There was no threat in her voice, nor any smugness from cornering someone, just gentle and pleasant, like those beautiful purple petals. Do you want the remaining intact flowers, or risk going to Mare and returning empty-handed? The sun shone behind her, making her whole person radiant, like a deity. I don't have much time for you to consider. After a while, the sky had already darkened. Michael stood beside Decarno, anxiously and impatiently saying to him, Your Grace, we must return to the duchy now. He kept repeating what he had already said several times. The morning market is over, and if it rains again, it will be difficult for us to leave today. Who knew that Decarno ultimately didn't listen to a single word, merely stating monotonously, it's raining. Then he ordered, Is Eva still at sea? Contact that ship for me immediately. Michael was still chattering behind him, trying to persuade him. Your Grace, this is at most a drizzle. Normally, Mare only experiences storms once or twice a year. Decarno had never been an easy person to get along with, so he threatened with such words. Can you take responsibility for these words? His voice also carried an unpredictable danger. Are you sure there won't be a storm today? Sure enough, just these 2 sentences had already forced Michael to stop nagging and, at the same time, stutter in terror. Decarno, who had been walking, suddenly stopped. From behind came the voice he had always disliked. Keith's voice rang out. We've arrived. Mississippi. On the boat, Keith was the first to disembark. Afterward, he turned around and extended his hand to help Eva down. Seeing her come down so happily, it seemed the deal had been resolved smoothly. Eva, overjoyed, didn't want to take all the credit. This is all thanks to you, Keith. Thank you so much. Keith recalled the earlier events, his heart still pounding. I was very surprised when Miss told me to throw all the flowers into the sea. He turned around and put the hood on for Eva and added, actually, I was quite nervous at that time. This scene, in Decarno Tiz's eyes, was like a bolt from the blue, making him find it extremely jarring. He hurried towards them, disregarding Michael's attempt to stop him. It's raining, put this on first. Finally, Eva noticed Decarno Tiz was here, and she subconsciously called out, Duke. The next second, her eyes widened slightly in surprise as an umbrella was brought to her side. The Duke was shielding her from the rain with his umbrella. Decarno Tiz then tucked the umbrella into Eva's hand. You hold it. Eva deliberately took a step back, not wanting to accept. But Decarno Tiz was faster, taking a step back, creating a distance of about a meter between them, and then asked with a hint of disappointment, is this distance okay? After speaking, he pursed his lips slightly, then moved closer again and reached out to remove her hood. Take this off. His movements were very smooth, and then he hurriedly turned and left. Eva was a little flustered and wanted to call out to him, Decarno, but only his retreating figure remained. Decarno Tiz had already walked far away. At this moment, Keith came to his senses, approached Eva, and then stared resentfully in the direction Decarno Tiz had left, complaining, is he always like that? Eva didn't know how to explain and quickly said, I apologize to you on his behalf. Keith was so scared he almost fainted on the spot, hastily refusing. I wouldn't dare accept Mrs. Apology. You don't have to do that. Usually, hearing him say such things would make Eva laugh, but now she lowered her head. She looked dejected, and Keith said no more, just stood there quietly watching her. After a moment, Eva spoke, let's go home first. It wasn't long before they arrived home. Suddenly, Keith's voice, filled with joy and happiness, rang out, Miss, I can't believe it. Eva was startled by the sound of Keith slamming the table. What's wrong? What happened? Who knew he was so excited, gesturing animatedly as he told her. I made so much money from just one deal. The profit is 20 times the principal. Eva smiled and let out a breath. Oh, is that so? That's quite a sum. Keith cleverly picked up on her words. You say it as if it's a matter of course. Eva reached for a box and then turned to him, saying, right, this is your share, Keith. Keith was somewhat surprised and asked blankly. He immediately understood Eva's intention and hurriedly, firmly refused. I didn't help you much. Mississippi Eva was pleased, thinking it was his deserved reward. Don't say that. When I had nothing, you and Nanny took me in, Keith. If you feel pressured, then consider this as rent from before until now. Keith keenly sensed the implication in Eva's words, rent. Miss, are you planning to leave here now? Eva didn't want to hide it from him. She nodded happily. Yes, I'm going to buy land now. Keith didn't quite understand her words, land. Eva didn't mind explaining it clearly to him. Well, my father said that a merchant needs a fixed place of business. She reached out and touched the coin she had earned, her voice filled with undeniable, joyful vitality. Now that I have some spare money, I plan to choose a place here to start a business. Since I've decided to trade exclusively with Mr. Firminio, I need to manage my business more systematically. And I can't just rely on flowers. I also need to grow other types of plants. She stopped abruptly as she said this. Keith was still watching her intently, his gaze unwavering. This made Eva a little embarrassed. She raised her hand to cover her cheek and asked playfully, Oh, is there something on my face? Why are you staring at me like that? Keith smiled pleasantly. It's nothing. After a moment, Keith also voiced what had been on his mind. It's just that I see you smiling more naturally now. Because when I first met you, you were no different from an emotionless doll. Just as the morning light once illuminated Eva during her darkest times, it now continues to shine warmly upon her at all times, without a trace of coldness. Please keep smiling like this, live happily, and don't be gloomy like before. Eva had never been as content as she was now, her eyes sparkling, incomparable even to starlight. She promised Keith, yes, I will. Eva suddenly heard a sound. It sounds like Nanny is back. Keith ran to the door and called out, Mom. Eva noticed the person standing next to Nanny was holding an animal in her arms. So she asked, Annie, what's with that puppy? Annie placed the puppy into Nanny's arms, then walked over to Keith and briefly explained, my dog had a few puppies a few days ago. Seeing as she likes them too, I brought one over. Eva sat in her chair, looking at the puppy in Nanny's hands, and couldn't help but feel fond of it. So cute. Keith walked over to look at her, then at the puppy, and finally asked, Miss, do you like it? Would you like to raise one? Unexpectedly, Eva's response was a refusal, her voice filled with self-doubt. No, I'm not qualified. As she spoke, the image of her former snow-white dog, Rex, faintly surfaced in her mind. A few days later, in the capital of Locke, the Emperor's office. Wait. Therefore, Aiden von Fierish sat on the throne, asking Decarno with a curious expression, you dismiss the mayors of 4 cities, but if you suddenly fire all the mayors, what will happen to those cities? Standing below, Decarno bowed respectfully and replied, they were all corrupt. I couldn't just let it be. One stared intently at the other, while the other turned a blind eye to the matter. The atmosphere was always suffocating and uncomfortable. Aiden's eyes also carried a condemnation that Decarno had gone too far. After a moment, Aiden spoke first. Duke, you are not one to act without reason. You already had a plan when I suggested Mr. Anders go to the west for a personal inspection, didn't you? Only then did Decarno raise his head. Yes. The Emperor sighed and rubbed his forehead. All right, I will confirm the details through the report. You've worked hard. Decarno bowed again. Yes. Then I request to take my leave. But he hadn't gone far when the Emperor suddenly called out to him, wait. But Decarno had already gone too far. The Emperor suddenly called someone over. I didn't see any sincerity at all. Another person said, he must be tired, that's why he's like this. I heard that during his inspection of the cities, he didn't rest for a moment. On the last day he left Mare, he stayed up all night at the port. Aiden replied, I knew it was troublesome work, so I was originally going to send Mr. Anders in his place. No, even so, there was no need to personally supervise the seaport, was there? It was late at night when Decarno returned to his mansion. He stood quietly below, gazing at the radio tower where he had spent a long time. This was a loneliness he had never felt when Eva was by his side. Indeed, she was needed here. But Eva's words at that time still lingered in his ears. Yes, I like it here more than the house he used to live in. In the end, she had no intention of returning to be his duchess. What should he do now? A sound caught his attention. Decarno turned around and saw a snow-white dog in the house calling to him. Its paws scratched against the glass surface, making a creaking sound. It barked incessantly, wanting him to come inside. Decarno looked at it as if he had seen a treasure, Rex. At this moment, he remembered the image of Eva playing with Rex. That's right, if it's you, Eva.